you're on. Test, test.
All right, everybody, good evening and welcome to March 7th, 2023 caucus meeting. Just a few opening remarks. We are in session on March 17th, coming up as a makeup day from December 23rd. That is a full day of school, and that is an in-person day, and again, that will be March the 17th. So again, tomorrow is an exciting day for our team, our unified bocce team. Our unified bocce is in their first year as a team, and tomorrow they're going to compete at the regional event at Penn State Schuylkill, and they'll leave here around 8:15. So we're excited for our athletes competing, and if they place, I believe, in the top two, from there, then they would compete at the state championship. So really exciting. The students are excited. We're excited for them. And congratulations to them, and the best of luck tomorrow.
How many teams are competing tomorrow, do you know? 10. 10, okay. Wow. All right. Way to swing that, Quiggs. Way to swing the bye.
All right, so taking a look at some agenda items for next Tuesday, let's go into some resignations, leaves, and transfers. Starting off, we have two noted retirements, and we note that these will be accepted with regret. And the first is Denise Boas. Denise Boas is an incredible school nurse. She's done such a wonderful and tremendous job within our school district, working with students for the past 27 years. And she will definitely be missed and always have a place, and we hope that she will come back and do some substituting as well as some mentoring for us in the future. And we wish her the best in her retirement. And the next is Miss Christine Miller. Chris Miller has been with our district for 35 years, and she's done a tremendous job inspiring, teaching, leading, both inside of the classroom as an English language arts teacher, as well as student council, providing just so much guidance and leadership for a tremendous amount of events. So together, combined, there's about 62 years of experience between these two outstanding individuals. So we wish them the best to both of them and hope that they will still be active in our community. Under employment, we have Mr. Mark Hamilton, who will be joining us. He's from Camp Hill, Pennsylvania, for the position of elementary principal. So we're hoping to get Mr. Hamilton as soon as possible. He is currently the principal at Millersburg School District, so we're hoping that Mr. Hamilton can join us relatively soon. And we're also excited to welcome Mr. Chester Holmes. Chet is currently works for an auditing firm, and he's a certified public accountant for the position of assistant to the superintendent for finance and operations. So we'll do some transition, and he'll be working alongside Mr. Bard during this transition. We have some change in status positions. We have Mrs. Kayla Falzerano, from a master's step 30, master's plus 30 to step 11, to master's plus 45 step 11. We also have Zach Laux from bachelor's degree to master's degree step 7, and Kelly Reichert transitioning from the position of receptionist to go back to working directly with students as a paraprofessional. And we also have Mrs. Rebecca Walsman from the position of elementary teacher to elementary assistant principal. So we're excited that she's going to kind of take a step and a change to help us out at the elementary school and provide that continuation of leadership for our elementary school. We have a leave of absence for Michaela Brown and some athletic coaches as well. We have coaches Laura Getcher, assistant coach for boys track and field. And we also have the resignation of Mr. Jade Wilson as head coach for boys basketball. And we'd like to thank Coach Wilson for all of his 2 years that he was leading our boys basketball team. And that sums up resignations, leaves, and transfers in employment. Are there any questions on those at this time? Heading into agenda items, we certainly, the highlight of any of our board meetings is always to hear our student representatives' reports. So we'll have Mrs. Evans and Ms. Allwhite presenting their reports. We have a motion to appoint a board delegate. So the board delegate will be for the Capital Area Intermediate Unit. This is a 3-year term starting July 1 of 2023 to June 30th of 2026. And this is a delegate role, and it's a rotating obligation with our participating member districts. And we share a spot, I believe, with Greenwood School District in our time to sit and have representation on the Capital Area Intermediate Unit Board. I believe they meet the 4th Thursday, and usually the meetings are at 8 o'clock. They have some committee work, but it's ad hoc committees, so it really is, the responsibility will be about every 4th Thursday, 8 o'clock. The meetings usually run pretty efficiently and pretty swiftly. So if anybody's interested, we'll take nominations at that time on Tuesday and see if there's anybody interested in that position. We have a motion to approve an independent contractor agreement for Mr. David Bittner. Mr. Bittner is a retired principal who's serving the capacity of interim elementary school principal, helping us out during the transition time between when Mr. Mark Hamilton is able to join us. We have summer camp coordinators, and the summer camp coordinators are paid through our ESSERS program, and they are Miss Lisa Perkins to lead our Early Birds, which is our pre-K program, very successful pre-kindergarten camp program, and Sarah Bear to lead our STEAM Adventure Camp. There's a motion to approve a field trip. The class of 2024 is asking to take a field trip to Baltimore, Maryland, and that will occur on April 26th of 2023 to visit the National Aquarium, Edgar Allan Poe's burial site at Westminster Cemetery, and have lunch together at the Hard Rock Cafe.
Is that the class of 23 or 24?
It's the class of 24. It's the
They're
junior
going this
class.
year.
Yes. The junior class had asked and worked with the principal as well as their advisor because of missing some field trips during their COVID-19 experience, and had asked and really came to, it was student-led in order for them to be able to go on this. So they're excited, and it is the junior class.
Good.
We have 2 donations in kind. The first is a donation in the amount of $2,000 from the Duncannon American Legion to be applied to delinquent lunch accounts at the elementary school. So we certainly thank the Duncannon American Legion. And we have an anonymous donation in the amount of $500 to be also applied to the delinquent lunch accounts. So to our unanimous donor, we also thank you for reaching out and helping for some of those outstanding balances for the lunch accounts.
And can we send something to Duncannon, to the American Legion?
Absolutely.
Dr. Fox,
Yes.
can you just quick say something brief right now and maybe something again at next meeting? I noticed that there were some questions about, and maybe just next meeting, maybe just to add this to next meeting to make a comment to the actual meeting. I noticed some comments. It seemed like there was some confusion on some parents about the letter that went out, although I think it was well written. I think some people, when they first noticed it, they thought that they were getting the email, that they were delinquent, and they weren't. So I think that there was just some confusion. And I also want to, and like I said, this can be for next meeting so that we can have something prepared, explain that though they can't buy a la carte items, maybe kind of go into a little bit of what an a la carte item is, and that it is not, though the school needs these donations because we do not get the money, we also cannot ask for the money back and not supply the child a lunch. In the past, they had gotten like a cold sandwich, and now they get the standard lunch. They do not get anything, even if their account is in arrears. They just can't buy the a la carte items. So if we can just put like a...
I'm actually prepared to talk about that tonight. So the letter that went out was, I was mistakenly thought that account balances were going out every week to parents, informing them of what their account balances were when they went negative. When I discovered that they were not being alerted, I have to manually set a calendar alarm to go into the system and notify every parent. So what I did was I told the system manually to notify every parent of what their account balance was. So not only did parents that had positive balances, but also parents that had negative balances. The letter was a system-generated letter, so it was not something that I had manually typed up. So the letter, if the letter was a negative letter, it would have had like a negative symbol before the $sign, which was confusing because further in the body of the letter it said, please make payment right away. So if you had a positive balance, which some parents did, some parents had $50, $60 in their account, and I received many calls on this. That's how I was ready to talk about it tonight. Some of the parents would say, why do I have to make payment when I thought my son or daughter has $70 in their account? So when it said I had to make payment, so I explained to them the crux of the matter, and so they do not need to do that. Moving forward in the future, only parents that had a negative balance will be getting notices on a Wednesday evening. They will be getting a notice going forward. The crux of why this has been an issue is because despite the generous donations that we have received, which is the $2,500 that we've received, our negative balances between student and staff has approached $20,000 cumulatively. This has gone back from 2017, 2018, and beyond. Some of the students have left the district, have disenrolled, and some of the account balances are uncollectible. What this really means, what an a la carte item is an a la carte item is anything in addition to a regular reimbursable meal. Reimbursable meals are the things that a student goes up and gets a milk, a drink, and anything that you get in the student lunch line that comprises a meal, like a sandwich, a fruit or vegetable, and a potato item, a starch item. This does not preclude, if you have a negative balance, a student from getting a lunch. We are barred from not allowing a student, no matter how negative their balance is, from giving a student a lunch. What we are capable of doing is stopping a student from charging an a la carte item if they have a negative balance. As a matter of fact, board policy states, the district's board policy states that a la carte items may not be charged to an account if it's a negative balance. So what we were running into is that the elementary school allows students to have ice cream, which is a little bit outside of the normal a la carte procedures, because we don't usually have ice cream there, on certain days for just, kind of pick-me-up days. And they were allowing ice cream to be charged in addition to what was going on. Now, over time, and I don't know how this became about, but there was kind of a little bit of flexibility that we were giving under the policy, which really was not entitled to be given, where if you had a negative $10 balance, we were giving parents up to negative $10, and then they were saying no more charging of anything. That's not really permitted under the policy. So we're going back to a plain text reading of the policy and enforcing the policy as is, because we really are carrying too much debt. And what will happen is every year the auditor will come in and say, you guys have to write off this bad debt. And how do you write off bad debt? You have to take a transaction from the general fund and give it to the cafeteria fund. So if it's 20 grand, you got to transfer $20,000 to the general fund. So what we do, and the way we can do that, is we can ask for donations from the community, or we can ask parents that, maybe, and a lot of times I think it happens is that parents don't really, I had a bunch of parents say, I didn't realize my son or daughter was eating in the cafeteria, and so I'm going to send the money in, and they do. And that's really, we've collected a lot. We've collected a couple of $1,000s over the last, since the reminders have gone out, and that case, and that's and that's how it goes. How we're going to approach it in this instance. So say a student comes up, so the big question now comes is, what's about a second lunch? Some kids, they are really hungry. It's their only meal of the day. The poverty line has not been adjusted by the USDA in several years, has not been adjusted for inflation. So I get it, things are tough out there. So how we'll handle a second lunch is considered an a la carte item. And a lot of kids were charging second lunches. So how we'll handle it, and how I asked our cafeteria staff to handle it, would be, if somebody comes up and they charge a second lunch and they have a negative balance, I have asked them to write the student's name and number down, their student ID number, not their phone number, their student ID number down, and approach the school administrator, let the lunch go through silently, do not embarrass the student, and then approach the school office and have somebody in the personnel in the office call the parent and let them know if this happened, so that the student doesn't feel like they're attacked, and that they do get that second lunch for that day, and figure out how to, and have the parent say this is a one-time courtesy thing. I ran this by Dr. Fox, and he approved that approach and that procedure. It's not really, there's a lot, every day, you can't create a policy for every single thing that comes up. And so this is one of those things where I asked our cafeteria to do the best they can in this, but also not to embarrass any student, so we don't have any embarrassing situations that come up in that situation. So that's kind of where we're at in this situation.
I actually have two questions, and I
Yes.
don't need an answer now, because this is more for, my expectation from this is that I ask the question and then we get an
Yeah,
answer.
sure.
It doesn't need to
Well,
be
that's no
answered.
problem.
I would like to know how many of them that is per school. Like, are we seeing a lot of kids getting, the reason I'm asking is that something that we as a board need to look at the policy? If an additional lunch, so if John and I both get one lunch, that's a reimbursable lunch. If he doesn't get one and I get two, that's still two reimbursable lunches. Should we look at that policy and see, should a reimbursable lunch be part of the policy as an a la carte item? Or
Well, the problem.
if we have a lot of kids doing this?
Well, I
So-
could answer that question. The reimbursable lunch is set by the USDA.
Okay.
So it's not like, so for an example, if we have 1,800 kids enrolled in the school, we don't get an allotment of 1,800 reimbursable lunches that we could redistribute it to kids who don't have it. I think that's what you're going at, like, you know what I mean?
I'm just wondering.
Yeah,
Kind
yeah.
of. I guess I just want to make sure that if kids can't afford a lunch, but they get two, I was just looking, but if it's not, if it's either not that big of a problem, I just looking at a different
Yeah,
one.
I think there's, if I looked at I could look it up actually while I'm sitting here, because I do have access to our system, but I believe there's probably about 10, I would say there's about maybe 4 or 5 students in the, it's more as the students get older.
Okay.
That they get more, as they need, they
Okay.
crave more food.
Sure.
You know what I mean? It's not so much a bigger deal at the elementary school, but as they get older, they, you know, I mean, I always ate more food as I got older. Now I could eat more, I could eat a lot of stuff, you know, so, you know what I mean? But, not to make light of it, but I'm just saying, you know, it's one of those things, as you get older, the more the kid seems to eat, the children seem to eat.
I just wanted to make sure,
Yeah.
I'm not sure when the last time we looked at that policy was.
I think it
and-
was right around the school lunch shaming law came in.
Okay, and I just wanted to make sure, like with what you were saying, like with the, you know, inflation, things like that, I just wanted to make sure that we were doing the policy correctly, I guess was my thing. But thank you for
Yeah.
answering that.
Quick question, because I got one of those emails and I got actually 2 of them. One of them still shows the balance for a graduate. How do you get that money?
I sent that out to inactive students up to a year. So anybody that was inactive for a year, if they owed money, or if they had a balance in their account that was positive.
Yes.
So if it was a positive, what you can do is you can reach out to our office and we could either refund you the money and give you a check, or you can transfer that money to another student if you
Okay.
have in the school. So that's one more thing as well. I wanted to mention that you could transfer that money to another student in the school if you have one, or you can request a refund, because that money also, either if you don't claim it within 3 years, we have to send it to the State Department of Treasury, and then it's like the unclaimed property thing, where you look up your name and you have to you request it that way.
Okay.
So we have 3 to 5 years that we can hold it before our auditors will say, you have to send that money to the State Department of Treasury. So.
So I actually have, so in School Cafe, which I think there is a function that parents can set to alert them at a certain amount when a balance gets to that amount. So if parents don't know that, they can set that. The other question, School Cafe, is that run by the nutrition group, or like who operates that?
It's actually run by School Cafe as a separate entity. It's not run by the nutrition group, and it's not run by us.
Okay.
So I do want to advise people of the School Cafe that when you could only put in $100 max per transaction, and there is a substantial fee. So I would recommend when people are doing that they send a check in with their student to the cafeteria or into the district, because it'll save you from the fee, because School Cafe runs their own fees. Those fees do not come to the Susquenita School District. They don't come to the nutrition group. We have nothing to do with that. We pay School Cafe there to do the point of sale system. It is recommended by the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania simply because it talks well with their system for reporting purposes, but it's not run by the Commonwealth either, and the fees don't go to them either. It's just a point of sale system, but their fees are,
It's like $3 per $100.
right, and you can only do a $100 max. So if you have 3 kids and you put $100 in, it's $10 for that, and it's substantial. So you're better off writing a check and sending it in than make it out to the Susquenita School District.
Is there any other options in School Cafe?
There are, but they're all around the same fee
They're all about the
structure.
same.
Yeah, and even our
So we
own-
pay and then they charge on top of that?
Yeah, our fee for the year is only maybe about $1,000. Yeah, it's only like $1,000 or $2,000 for School Cafe. Yeah, and that's our point of sale system. Yeah. So even like when it comes to credit card payments and stuff like that, even our general fund bank charges like 3.9% per transaction for taking credit card payments. So
The other is more, it's not really it's more of a comment. So I know that one of the things I've heard within the community, especially within the middle school, is that there still seems to be some issues where maybe the 5th and 6th graders are eating a lot, and by the time the 8th graders get to lunch, because they have the late lunch, they're being told that there's not enough left. And so I'm not sure how that's being managed. I have a 6th grader, and so I know they can eat a lot, and he definitely partakes in 2 lunches.
I will
So-
definitely follow up again with that. I know they've been making an effort to correct those supply issues, but there hasn't. I was told by the food service manager, the new person, Mr. Ed Fair, who started a couple of months ago, that there should not be that type of issue, that they should be making enough. But how that translates to the actual on the ground is another thing. We will look into that, and I will. I'm sure Mr. Black will also help me with that as well.
No, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you very much. And that, the policy I think that we were referencing was policy 808.1, and that was updated in 2018. So to continue on with our items for the upcoming board meeting, review of agenda items, we have policy motion to approve a second reading of policy 208, which is withdraw from school. Looking to approve our board meeting schedule that I believe should be, if it isn't, I'll make sure you get a copy of that if it isn't already at your place setting, which kind of uses the same format and schedule of this current school year. And three recommendations from our discipline committee, and three individual incidents relating to that, as well as some disposition of items, which include old band raincoats, and the district office is looking to get rid of some old, outdated Read 180 material that's no longer in use. And that rounds out some of our agenda items. I'll turn it over to Mr. Bard for review of finances.
I believe you have this month's expenditure report at your seat. We are June, July. Let's see. Hang on. March, April, May, June. So we're about 2/3 of the way through the school year, and we've only spent about 53% of our salary and benefits. That is very representative of, well, two things. Number one, we could accrue salaries for teachers to the end of August, which we will, but also a lack of staffing in our maintenance, and a lack of staffing in our paras, and that's continues to be problematic for the district, and that was the same thing as last year. The one thing I would like to point out is some of the one thing that you guys will probably see is in the 2300 object code, where you see an 1800% spending thing. I checked on that. That actually is a correct for all expenses. That is an increase of commission, or the commission for cap tax when they collect the capital tax for the earned income tax. Cap tax collects, and that's where it's the proper coding where it's supposed to be. It was not budgeted. There was not a amount budgeted for in there last year. That is the reason why it's only 9,100. There should be a substantial number budgeted for in there, and there was not. So that is why that number is high. There's also some money in there for another, that's where our audit is also placed in there as well. So our fiscal audit is also placed in that budget line item as well. And our budget, and that's actually a year and a half worth of budget or audit expenses are in there as well, because of how long the audit went the previous year. So that's the reason why that line item is very, very bloated compared to what was budgeted for there.
So wait, so just explain that to me. So
when we
had $9,100 budgeted and we spent $169,000?
Well, that's combined among about two or three different line items in there. So that's
Okay.
why it's expensive. It should have been close to probably 90,000 budgeted, so we would be over budgeted. But it was because the audit was a very expensive proposition, and also because we are collecting a lot of, delinquent real estate commission goes in there as well, and we are collecting a lot more delinquent real estate taxes.
Okay.
Real estate transfer taxes, because Phil's doing a great job at selling real estate, so we're getting a lot of transfer taxes in.
Okay.
So all the commission for all those type of things, that when people collect those taxes, go into those professional development services for that 2,300. So the more, and that is reflected on the revenue side, how strong the revenue collection is.
Okay.
So which I was about to draw your attention to.
Okay.
So when you go to the revenue side of things, when you see how strong the revenue is trending on, for example, first off, the earnings on investment, we're gonna eclipse the $150,000 that I budgeted for. We should get to somewhere around $280,000 by the time the year is over. So that'll be something that is a net positive. You will see the revenue from the local side of the revenues are hang on a second. Oh, I'm sorry, yeah, the line, I'm sorry, that's what I'm looking for here, because I gotta make my sheet bigger here, hang on one second. So I'm looking at my thing here. The earnings on investment line number 12 on there is at $123,000 for the year, but I'm projecting, and I shared it with Dr. Fox, the investment report, we are looking at it to get to 286. Oh, the code is 6,500. It's on line. Yeah, line 6,500. We are at 123,000 that we have received so far this year because of approving the thing we're going to approving the plan that I put forth. We'll get about $282,000 in by the end of the fiscal year.
And you had originally planned for 150?
Yes.
Okay.
So that will be a substantial increase in that. When you look at the taxes and the revenue at 6,100 there, the 6,100 taxes levied by the LEA, we have $14 million, or 1480 or 14,080 budgeted with $1 million left. We still have 4 months to collect earned income taxes, which are pacing at just to wipe that out completely by itself, and we still have the current levy with delinquents to come in. So I think we're going to go over that as well. So I believe that all will be a substantial, I think that will be a substantial increase for then what we were expecting as well. So I think for overall, I think that just shows you, number one, the strength of the economy in Perry County and in the Susquenita School District. Number two, the strength of the real estate market. Number three, the strength of our taxpayers, and the fact that this was a very strong revenue budget from the beginning. The state does owe us some money, but don't worry about when you guys look at this and you see that the state's lagging behind on subsidy payments. They always lag behind and they catch up at the end because we don't get a lot of money in this period of time. They'll catch up in the end. So when you don't get too worried about that. And when it comes to where I believe the district is projecting at, we budgeted a $2.2 million deficit. I think we're going to land somewhere around $1.6 to $1.8 million and somewhere in that range based on between the revenue and the expenses. Somewhere in that range. If we keep going in this, if we keep going, if there's not any surprises in that respect. Are there any questions on this? Yes.
I have two, actually.
Two, okay.
So went back with the 1,800% that you
Yes.
talked about. So where was that originally budgeted that we should see that line item?
You know, when I looked at
Was it originally
when I looked at the
budgeted?
previous budget, I believe to be honest with you, I did not see a line that was marked for
audit.
for audits.
Okay.
So
it
I did
wasn't
not see where it
previously
was for previously marked for
Okay.
budget, so I can't
Okay.
say. When it comes to the commission, I believe the commission was spread out over into other categories such as, to be honest with you, I think it was spread out over other categories throughout the 2300s and other places. I just can't, I don't have, that's why when I went through, when we talk about the budget presentation and the other questions that you guys were asking, I gave very specific, and I unpacked it into maybe ad nauseum detail so that you guys saw extra where it was, so that there was not any more confusion. I did it for myself, but I did it for other, I started this in November to unpack it into greater detail so that I wasn't asking the same questions like, where is this exactly in here?
No, and that'll be good to know for this coming budget to make sure that we put it in there.
Right,
and
it is in there
account
this
for it.
time, it is in
Okay,
there this time.
Perfect.
But I did that ad nauseum because I wanted to make sure that, I did it for myself because I wasn't planning on leaving when I unpacked this thing, that I wanted to make sure ad nauseum that this was going where it was going.
And the other question I had was, Mr. Howell's going to think I'm picking on him. Under 2,600
Yes.
for 400s, it looks like we're like 500.
Oh, that's where the roof project is.
Okay,
So the roof
perfect.
project was in there, so before you get all mad at Mr. Howell,
I'm not
Okay,
I'm
all
just
right,
asking.
that's it.
Because he's going to think I'm picking on him. I'm just,
she asked why the 400s were so far overexpended in the 2600s.
Okay, that's what we were just asking.
Yeah, that's where the roof project is, so a lot of that is offset with the grant money.
Okay.
So that's where the $400 and some thousand roof project was. And also, you'll see in somewhere in the 300s as well, just so I'll draw your attention to it, you see how his salaries are at 52%. It's very low for what it should be, but his 300s are a little bit higher. That's because, that's for the cleaning services, so that's where the offset is. So that's why you'll see it, the seesaw, but the salaries will come in really low, but it'll be offset in the 300s.
so I do have a question for salaries. We do that on a fiscal year, July 1 to June 30, but we pay out through August, correct?
Right, and so what'll happen is we'll accrue back, and then we'll do a transaction, and we'll put them all back onto the fiscal
The
year.
prior fiscal
The
year.
fiscal
So we
year,
pay
right.
out through August, but we put them back on the prior
Right.
fiscal year.
Right.
So, okay, perfect. Thank you.
All right, if there are no other questions for review of finances, I'm super excited to welcome some cast members and crew from the upcoming performance, Cinderella. So welcome.
Do you want them to dance?
Yes.
Okay.
So I think this is a great preview as we look coming up here next week. I believe it's the March 16th through the 19th, if I'm correct in saying. Tickets can be purchased online, and there is no fee for purchasing your tickets, I believe.
But it's just like,
They don't know where it went.
I think I went to salaries. No, I don't think Ken did either.
Yeah, but Ken didn't know anything. But I'm not sure if she knew where it went.
Yeah, I think I went to salaries. Yes, that's why salaries are so much lower. That's why I checked that number, so I could explain. That's how I was able to explain. Oh, buddy, you're gonna see my quick wit nod of explain everything.
They're the audience. The board is the audience, yes. So face the projector. The projector is the audience, guys. Like the.
They do. That's why I gave you descriptives, because I have a drop dead policy. If I were to drop dead, somebody needs to know what's going on.
Oh, well, that's never happened.
Yeah, but it could. I don't, but that's why I wrote things down in the budget line items, so everybody knows where everything is. So you can say, Phil, here's where we spent on middle school FICA. Gives a shit what FICA is. That's Medicare and Social Security.
I know.
Yeah, but I'm just saying,
You're right, but some of these people have no idea.
right.
I just know because I've done cable for 30 years.
But like, you could all, well, here's what we spent on elementary supplies now, because I put it in there, here's what elementary supplies are. Here's what tech supplies are. Ken was like, grossed up this, grossed up this. I'm like, what do you gross up? I can't find the hot money in here. What the hell's not in here? You know what I mean? And Ken doesn't know.
Oh, you're saying Ken. I thought you were saying Ken.
No, Ken.
You don't need to know Ken.
I don't know Ken. Ken, you know.
Ken.
You go, he doesn't know. He didn't know his You were talking bad about him. You don't even.
Bad about
Now,
Ken, but I
were you guys in the middle of rehearsal?
Ken Medina.
walked in.
Yep. Awesome.
Yeah, I know.
He He made it better
They just
before
like
he got
project.
No, he did.
here. I know Mike got
People
No, he did, he did.
sometimes, but that's.
He did.
Certainly for our listeners at home, you may not be able to hear this, but we encourage you to come starting on Thursday and Friday and Saturday. Please visit the website for more information.
Put the dates on.
Lord Pinkleton, I want you to tell us to all a pronouncement. An announcement.
describing what it could be like if she were there hypothetically. Oh, yeah. Sure.
Absolutely outstanding. Thank you so much for joining us and for your talents and all of your hard work that I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, didn't it start like October? Or maybe even earlier than that, I think. Oh, okay. Nevertheless, seems like it was forever, but you've done such a great job. Absolutely. But again, please come out March 16th through the 18th. See all of this talent in action and all of their hard work, and we certainly look forward to it.
And don't forget, Sunday's the brunch.
Thank you. And
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Tina, why don't you go ahead and plug that again? I don't think the mic picked up on it.
This Sunday from 11 to 1 is a character brunch where the main cast will be dressed in characters and will be interacting with the kids. And the kids are encouraged to wear their best princess and prince attire. And there will be activities, there will be photos taken. You can get your photo taken with Cinderella in the carriage or on a backdrop. There will be activities for the kids like crown making, and then there's breakfast as well. So eggs, pancakes, waffles. $10.
Tina, where is it at?
Tickets are at the door in the cafeteria in the high school.
Thank you.
Yeah, this Sunday. Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you very much. It sounds spectacular. And speaking of spectacular, to follow up, Mr. Colstock, boy, I apologize. I think that's like twice in caucus presentations that I kind of had you follow some really tough things.
I just
here.
expect your presentation to be done in song tonight. I mean, you know.
And dance. And dance.
I've been to a lot of school board meetings. That may be probably one of the best presentations I've seen. That was unbelievable. Could somebody help me move this table? Actually, I know I normally stand and sing and dance during your presentations, but I wanted to sit down tonight, and I want to move it a little bit closer to everybody.
You grab a chair.
Thank you.
Tell us when to stop.
That's good. Yeah, thank you.
Is that Prince Charming? Okay.
I will take that as a compliment. Thank you. Takes a lot to make me blush, but he may have done it. Okay, so see if there we go. All right, for tonight's updates, does the clicker on this work? Oh. There we go. I got it. Oh, maybe I don't. There we go. Okay, so this part of the update, we're going to review the existing conditions of your facilities. So we had our team actually met with Dr. Fox, walked the facilities. Then back in December, I believe, we had a civil engineer who was on site. Civil engineer is K&W Engineers, which is out of Harrisburg. They're right on Front Street. And then more engineering. They're the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing engineer. They're out of Lancaster, Pennsylvania. They walked, I think it was right before Christmas, they walked the buildings with Scott. What they do is they provide a report, and we will also provide a report. This will be in the study. But I want to go over some of the things that we've found. One of the points that I want to make in our evaluation is the average age of a school, of a typical school in the United States, is 40 years old. Just to kind of keep that in mind. Typically, when a building undergoes a renovation or if it's new construction, should anticipate every 20 years buildings should be upgraded. with new MEP systems, finishes. That's just when, because of all the heavy use, that's when you see things are going to start to reach the end of its life expectancy.
What's an MEP?
Mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. Okay. So when we show these photos, and some districts, will show photos of some really significant deficiencies, it's not meant to say that you are not doing a good job maintaining your buildings. It's not meant to insult your facilities department. It is just meant just to show this is the age of the buildings. It's showing its age. And we understand that to have these things upgraded or replaced are extremely difficult because you have things like prevailing wage rates that if you do a project and how that can potentially increase construction cost. Or you already have a capital improvement project set up for summer work, but you can only do some of this stuff over the summer, or depending on your budget, you can only do it in increments and you kind of have to prioritize and do one at a time. So this isn't meant to say that the maintenance of these buildings is poor. It's just meant to say, hey, this building is or is not at the end of its life expectancy. So what we'll do is, based upon these conditions, we will make recommendations. So in some cases, these recommendations may be, hey, this is an older system. Technology has changed in the last 20 years. These are things that you should potentially look at as far as an upgrade to a system. Codes have changed over the last 20 years. So these are some of the new codes that you must comply to if you undergo a renovation. So we'll make those recommendations, and then we will provide cost to upgrade. And these are almost in-kind status quo cost to upgrade. When we develop the options, this will basically be option one. If a district does nothing to address their enrollment, if they do nothing to address their educational program, but if they choose an option just to address these deficiencies and the age of their buildings, this is what we're gonna put costs together for this. And potentially you can use that if you want to do a comprehensive project and get it all done at once, because you'll have, Dr. Fox and I have talked about this multiple times, you can do a state contract where you get an economy of scale. There was a mention of roof replacement, roof repairs. Say all 3 buildings need it. So you go through a state contract and you enter into a contract with a roofing contractor that's going to do all 3 roofs. So you're going to get an economy of scale where they're going to give you some price reduction because they're doing 3 projects rather than 1. But to further that and to get even more of a cost savings, that is what would be considered economy of scope. Where now, in addition to addressing all the roofs, you're now also doing things like all the carpets in the building or all the painting. That's when you would do a comprehensive project. But you could elect to do just capital improvement projects. We would help you prioritize what needs to be addressed first, and then you hit those based upon your budget. You hit those over a 5-year, 10-year period. When we provide the costs, the way that we provide the cost, it's not a list of, well, here's your HVAC system. This is what it would cost to upgrade this, and then here's the cost for the boiler. And then when you look at the electrical work, this is the switchgear, and then this is the transformer. It's not meant to be a menu, but it's meant to be more of a comprehensive list of if you were to do a total project. So the way we base that is on recent projects that us and our engineers have done of similar size and scope, that we can put a cost per square foot together to do all these types of replacements. So that's kind of where we start with the first option. Then when we start building the next few options, these are where we're going to look at enrollment, which really isn't in your case, but if you wanted to maybe increase the capacity for some reason, or some of those educational program deficiencies that we discussed at the last meeting. So the first school we're going to start off with is the elementary school. Most of the stuff in this building, it's as far as like the interior finishes. The way I'll set this up is we're going to do general construction items first, and then we're going to do civil, and then mechanical, electrical, and then plumbing. For the exterior, things like the windows, the doors, they're all at the end of their life expectancy. In the classrooms, the flooring finishes, the ceiling, the casework, those are all aging and in need of replacement. You see in the corridors, flooring, painting, very typical. I did note in the last presentation that there are several classrooms that do not have natural daylight. You have the demountable wall partition system that defines those rooms. You don't open those spaces up, but if you ever wanted to for some reason, but that is kind of an outdated system in schools. It's in good condition. Because of the age of this school, those don't offer the best acoustical properties. There was also notes of potentially adding some doors throughout the school in the hallways rather than having the gates, because if you close down the school at night, you have those gates, they could potentially hinder egress out of the building. So what we'll do in school, these gates are no longer part of these roll down gates, or the gates that you kind of see in this photo on the sides. Those are not used in renovated or new projects. So what we do is we set up, typically we set them up where fire doors would be located, and they're at nighttime, they're usually locked down. They're on magnetic hold opens. They can be locked down and then used for egress out of the building, depending on the egress path that's required by code. So we recommend maybe separating the building in a couple of locations to allow that to happen. Also signage within the building, student wayfinding, we thought was a little difficult. I mean, there's other ways that you can do it with just signs, but you can also do it with like flooring material with maybe 2 colors in the floor. So those were some of the general construction items throughout the corridors and the classrooms. This is some photos of the nurses' suite. You can see that the cots, typically we would have curtains around the cots for privacy. These just have these transparent curtains. Seemed to be a need for storage in the nurses' suite, and some of the toilet rooms did not meet ADA, Americans with Disability Act requirements. One of the other things that we noted, and with the input of Dr. Fox, that there was a variety of furniture systems throughout the building. Some of them are not the most flexible furniture for students to quickly, and teachers and faculty to break it down and to rearrange it depending on the type of activity that they were doing, whether it was an individual or a small group or a large group. But we did note that we thought that the maker spaces, like the media center, was well done as far as the layout. And then the LGI, whoops, And then the LGI needed to be, seemed to not have a great function or purpose, that maybe there's that possibility that you could repurpose that space. The carpet in that space was also dated, and the tiered system in this space is outdated. We don't see this much. It's not a request that we get from a lot of districts, and what it potentially does is then limits the flexibility of how you could use that space. The Apple Lab seemed to be really well maintained, a lot of thought put in it. It was definitely one of the highlights of the elementary school. So then with the site.
I want to note that
Yep.
the nurses, we are upgrading, the cots are in this year's budget for replacement.
Okay.
So the cots are up there being replaced.
All right.
They can, so Mrs. Boaz had noted during I did this walkthrough, that she had preferred the clear curtains, because she'd be able to supervise the students while they were laying down for behavioral purposes. Yeah, so that she could actually see them if they're picking the things off the cot if they're laying in there. But the cots are being replaced. I just don't want anybody to be shocked by the condition of the cots. They are in this year's budget to be replaced.
I guess my question with that is that, yes, I understand that you're saying curtains and curtained off space, but is there also a sense of that they have to maintain a line of sight, to be able to watch them? So, I mean, where does that cross in that if they're in there resting and the nurse has to be able to maintain a line of sight to make sure that they're okay, and that you visually seclude them, and if a child has an emergency and the nurse can't see them?
Yeah.
So from that standpoint, I kind of.
That's a good point.
Yeah, Mrs. Boaz had, because we asked, Mr. Lovato had asked about them, and Mrs. Boaz had said that she had requested those clear ones so that she can keep an eye on the students in that respect. So when it comes to the nurses suite, I just wanted to comment on that before we got too deep into the other schools.
Yep.
Thank you.
So with the general construction, with the interior finishes, I mean, there was nothing that we would feel that is out of the ordinary that needs to be addressed immediately. For the site, the biggest deficiency is the pickup in the afternoon. And there's no separation between the buses and the parent pickup. There was significant backlog that backs out in the Susquenita Drive, potentially onto 15. This is a recommendation that if you move forward with a project and it included site improvements, this is the first deficiency that you should look at trying to address.
How are you going to address that? Do you have any idea?
Well, depending on the scope of work, is there a way that you could create another main entrance to the school that aligns internally with the existing main entrance? Have, whether it's the existing main entrance stays as the parent and the buses are in the back. But, I mean, we'd have to look into that a little bit further, but that would be the goal, is to of site improvement that you get enough queuing for both the buses, for the parents, have them enter into, it's ideal if they can enter into the same space, but it's not always possible. So what we'll do is we'll try to locate that entrance into a corridor that aligns with the entrance for the other drop-off
Anthony, did you say in the afternoon or in the morning?
in the afternoon.
Because the mornings is hellacious too, if you haven't noticed.
Well, typically, because all the buses are coming in, they're all going to be there in the afternoon, and parents, it's usually when we'll see But if it's also difficult in the morning as well.
Well, I mean, I sometimes arrive at that time and I want to pull the hair out of my head. That's why I keep it short. But yeah, I mean, we're well aware of it here as a district, and Dr. Fox and I have had discussions on how we can, number one, slow the traffic down in there, in the line and keep the traffic in one lane. Number two, for safety purposes. Number two, how we could decongest the area. And we're hoping that you guys could help us out with that as well, because it is a challenge to get all the parents and the buses in at one time, especially at the elementary time. You know, I think the high school and middle school are okay, but I think it's more so at the elementary time.
The high school has another issue, but when we develop options, this is what we'll look at, and to come up with some ideas on how to make that happen.
I have a question. Do we separate car riders and bus riders at the elementary school pickup time like we do at the middle school?
And do we have somebody when you're dropping off in the morning from a car rider? Is there a teacher there that meets them right at the door?
Yes.
Okay.
At their car.
So what is, I don't remember it being a problem when my kids were in elementary school, that's what I'm wondering.
The
What's
problem, as I see it, is so many people drop off now that the line of cars is so long that it backs out Susquenita Drive and the whole way on to 15. The buses usually can get around. I've experienced this. I know what you're talking about. But the morning is way worse than the afternoon. The afternoon, the parents pull in, they find a spot, they park, they walk over to the side entrance, they get their kids. In the morning, it's a circular drive-through where people drop off. So you could, if there's land available or space, to create a separate, maybe a 2-lane thing for cars or something. I mean, I'm not an engineer, so I can't see it. But the mornings are terrible at drop-off. And it's because the quantity difference from when our kids were in elementary that dropped off compared to now.
Yeah, Anthony, that's what I thought were really the bigger issue was, I would say, in the morning, not the afternoon, because I'm over there more in the afternoon than I am in the morning, and I noticed that in the afternoon, it's kind of like Jonathan said, it's kind of orderly in the afternoon, but it's less orderly in the morning.
Well, it's probably because you have to physically get out of your car. You have to park your car and go
Yeah,
get your
you gotta
child.
get your
Where
child,
in the
yeah.
morning, you're just dropping off in
And
a
it's
line.
different dismissal times as well.
Yeah, right.
A best practice, right now they're stacked, the cars and the buses are stacking in the same area. Best practice is to have them separate. They're separate driveways. You don't have that cross-vehicular traffic congestion with the two, that they have a separate driveway, they have a separate exit, and if there is a way that we can create that separation on the site, what's going to end up happening is you'll have potentially 2 different entrances into the building, but at least that way, you know, you're not having traffic back up onto 15.
Well, the other 2 schools have to have sections.
Yeah.
The buses come up here to
Yep.
the high school, and the middle school has their own bus section and their own parking space.
Yeah, possibly, yeah. So one of the things that we'll review with the administration, okay, how many buses do you have? How many cars do you anticipate in the morning, in the afternoon? And then we would lay out a conceptual plan to make sure that it has enough queuing space for that amount of cars, for that amount of buses. And there's other things that can be done. You know, the way that the buses line up right now is they line parallel to the curb. You can also do a chevron parking spaces for the buses where the students can still empty out onto the curb. They're not walking through the street, but it helps take up less space. The buses won't have as long of a queuing line. Some of the other site issues were extremely minor. The one that's pretty consistent is the dumpster area that doesn't quite have enough access to for the waste management company. So that would be something else that we would look at. So this is the HVAC system, which is a geothermal system. Your heat pumps are They do not have the ability to dehumidify. The heat pumps are also located above the ceiling, which I am sure that is extremely difficult to access. Best practices now is that those heat pumps are typically in closets, that they're easy to access. So the age of that system, you're probably, some here and there, but if you underwent a project, we would recommend all the rooftop exhaust fans should be replaced. And then we were also suggesting looking at the water piping. Based upon the age of it, it may not be as efficient. The should be replaced. Rates don't meet the current codes, and there's some duct work on top of the roof, and best practice is to have no duct work on top of the roof. So if you could replace those, if you could replace the rooftop units and somehow bring the ductwork directly into the building and run above the ceiling, that would be ideal. If that can't be done, then the ductwork and the insulation around it on top of the roof should be replaced. And then temperature, automatic temperature controls, they don't meet current standards. Those would also be recommended to be replaced.
When you have items that are underlined, are those priority items?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. And I would say for the middle school and the high school, probably the biggest issue is the domestic water. But the sanitary sewer system, right now, piping systems seem to be working. We would just recommend having those scoped just to see what the condition they're in, especially when they exit the building, where most likely the material for that piping is going to be terracotta and would be subject for crumbling. So we would recommend having, for some due diligence, having those scoped. But for the domestic water, because you're on a well, the piping into the building for both the middle school currently has some pinhole leaks in it, and over time that's going to degrade. That will get worse. There is also booster pumps from that well that we would recommend replacing those, because expectancy is that clock now to about 5 years. Things for like the mixing valves for the water heaters, looking at the stormwater system coming from your roof drains, scoping those to see what type of condition they're in, replacing plumbing fixtures, whether it's toilets or faucets, upgrading them to ADA compliance. And then depending on if you enter into a project, depending on the size and the scope, just consider installing a fire protection system, a sprinkler system in the building. And then the electrical systems for all the buildings were in really good shape. I think it was in the last 5 years, there was a lot of upgrades. But just a couple of things here with the transfer switches for the emergency generator. And lighting controls, we were suggesting that with the lighting controls, if you could go to a network-based lighting control, which could be done remotely. There were some of the receptacles, we did not see where there were GFI receptacles in locations that would require it by code, just again, because of the age of the building. And then your data closets did not have their own designated space, which are usually, because of all the equipment and the heat that they generate, the data racks, those need to be conditioned and rooms that are cooled. And those are also the spaces where your IT is, they're probably working on that equipment a lot. And having a designated room for those data racks and ease of access for your IT staff to get to that is extremely important. Whoops. So again, with the middle school, still in fair to good condition. This would also, we would also suggest looking at window and exterior door replacement. One of the other things that we noted with this entrance, with this massing out here, that there were some sight lines that seemed to be cut off because of it from the entrance and the administration area, that if there was a way to lighten that up to help with visual sight lines from the interior to the exterior, that would be ideal. Roof was in good condition, but there were a couple of areas where we did note some moisture saturated in the insulation. One of the things that could be done is there could be a thermal scan done of the roof where they can read where that potential moisture content is. And then if you were to do a roof repair, maybe it's just those few areas where they would cut out the insulation and then replace it. Otherwise, there's the potential that you could go through an entire re-roofing system and insulation on the middle school. Continuing on the exterior, we did see some of these lintels where there's some signs of water and moisture damage, and some of the tile being damaged because of water getting behind into the wall cavity, which causes rust. Some sidewall cracking. And then currently the guardrails and the handrails to the stairs are not code compliant, but that's for the current code, they're not compliant. So when the building was renovated 20 years ago, it was a different code.
What is currently compliant?
What would make it compliant?
Like, what is currently compliant?
Oh, what is currently compliant with the stairs? Well, the treads and risers are compliant. What it is, it's the guardrail, and there is no handrail. So they have to be at certain heights. So you'll see there isn't a handrail on that left-hand side. There's a guardrail, but the guardrail is to prevent you from falling over. The handrail is for you to hold as you're going up the stair. And there's requirements of what those heights are supposed to be. And typically they're not this, I shouldn't say typically, they're never the same. Because the guardrail has to be higher and the handrail has to be, yeah. And then there's also requirements as to how far it extends above and below the first and last riser.
So the top of the guardrail can't act as the handrail. They have to be two separate. So basically your guardrail comes higher because I think people are gonna fall over the edge.
So again, just like the elementary school, just casework was dated or damaged. Same way with the flooring finish in the classrooms and the ceilings. You can see some of the warping of the ceilings in this photo, where they're kind of like bubbling. I'm sorry. Here's some more. There was a little bit of this fixed casework in the science labs then prohibits any flexibility within that classroom. And some of the laminate was falling off as well. So some of the flooring systems, whether it was tile, carpet, VCT, just really showing its wear. And then this is, there was a lack of designated storage spaces in the building. So you'll see that room on the top is the kiln room, or there was a kiln in there, and it's now being used for storage. And then there was a classroom that's being used for storage. So we talked about this at the last meeting when we discussed the educational program deficiencies, is you're deficient in designated storage spaces. You have capacity for the buildings, but unfortunately you're kind of lacking on storage. And what's very important is we always recommend that when you develop these storage rooms, they should be designated for specific materials. So if this is grade level storage, or this is storage for the maintenance department, or maybe you have a single storage room for your PTO, or for your props and for the stage. And then you have in locker spaces, showers that they're just not used. Gang showers, it's very rare that we design gang showers anymore. We're doing individual shower rooms. There was some of the toilet rooms were also did not meet ADA. And one thing that you may want to consider any under renovation is if you want to address gender neutral toilet rooms. A lot of districts are making sure that that is included in their locker room spaces. And this next one, back to the nurses suite. Again, the casework outdated or didn't have the ability to be locked. Some of that visual supervision for that middle school nurse was lacking. In the gymnasium with the stage, I'm sorry, the stage had it had a wheelchair lift, but we didn't know if that was still in operation. So I want to make sure that you have accessibility on top of the stage. There was the stairs to get to the stage. Those were well maintained. Gym bleachers, those condition, older, probably past their life expectancy and would also need ADA upgrades as well. And then for the tech ed, that seemed to be really laid out well. And then the last one on the bottom right, that is the music, the band room, which we would recommend some additional acoustic treatments in that space, whether it be the ceiling or acoustical panels and diffusers on the wall.
Just so you know, that room was never meant to be a band room. The school was designed with no band room.
Well, with the ceiling height, it's a good candidate to make it a band room.
Nice selection, Mr. Quigley.
Yeah. And then for the family consumer science, again, just a variety of some of the furniture systems, just like you saw at the elementary school, that are not conducive to current flexibility that you want in your classrooms. And then the caboose, the ramp definitely is not ADA accessible, but one of the things that we thought that this could potentially be an educational opportunity, and I think that there were some suggestions. Did you want to share?
Sure. Well, the first is that this was a student-led project, I believe several years ago, that students were involved in bringing this onto campus, and I believe it was also Morrison's actually helped to put this into place, and the students worked tediously on creating the space for the community to be able to use. So one of the things that was suggested that we reach out and to the East Stroudsburg Railroad to see if they're able to help us. So currently, right now, we're taking some photos of it, sending it to them, and they've been an outstanding community member in the Lancaster area, and they have a division that refurbishes. So we're going to see certainly some of the feedback that they receive to us, and to see if they could come out and take a look at our project.
The other thought is partnering with Eagle Scout that might be able to do is portions of it, if there's things that you wanted them to do as an Eagle Scout project.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think as we,
That has not been usable in 17 years. I mean, it was in bad condition when I went down there. So that is so far beyond an Eagle project. I mean, it is unreal.
I meant like if we were gonna do anything with it, I was thinking like the decking or something that's not the caboose itself. But if we're not gonna do anything with it, then I agree. What was it intended for?
It was originally an outside classroom. Harry McGee and a bunch of people brought it here. And then I get to understand, and that's, the building, it was built, I mean, it was there prior to all that. So it's actually an outside classroom, and they did different things with it. I mean, that was the original intent. But once they built the building around it.
So they built the building
just sort of
around
no
the
one ever
caboose?
used it.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Well, as a person who lived through the caboose, and I could say the only issue that divided this community more than the caboose was COVID. No. It was a project of Tom Campbell, who was assistant superintendent. He thought this was a terrific idea, and a lot of other people just said, huh? And a lot of people were for it, a lot of people were against it. It was not a well thought out idea. Let's put it that way.
As far as the site deficiencies, they're very minor. Just kind of take a look here. Again, the dumpster area, just maybe rearranging that so the waste management company has better access to it, but just kind of typical paving repairs, curbing repairs, things like that, addressing ADA requirements on the sidewalks. So the HVAC system, this is a 4-pipe system, different from the geothermal. But again, the current system does not have active dehumidification, so we would recommend that any system upgrades, you want to address that. Just like the middle school, the ventilation rates don't meet current codes. And we also would recommend, I think you had, Scott, correct me if I'm wrong, you had ATC, was there upgrades to that recently for the automatic temperature controls? Yeah. So it's new controls with old systems, so yeah, just continue to adjust those as needed, that you're getting the efficiencies that you should be getting with those new controls. With the plumbing system, pretty much exactly the same as the elementary school. The main domestic water line has some pinholes in it as well. This will potentially then be an issue. We really want to try to have our engineers identify system deficiencies that could potentially cause a disruption in the educational instruction. Electrical system, very similar, a lot of recent upgrades, but pretty much the same as the elementary school. And then for the high school, again, we're looking at potentially doors, windows. There's a little bit more of the drive-it EFIS system on this building. That should be looked at. That probably has had a lot of moisture penetrate into that system. Did see some cracking and uneven paving surfaces that then they're not going to be ADA compliant. See some of the wear and tear at the loading dock and the drive-it system. There was this corner of the building over here also has some stormwater runoff issues, and we're getting water over into this LGI door over here. Did notice some bubbling of the terrazzo, but that could potentially be replaced or fixed. There were toilet rooms that weren't ADA compliant. Here's two more photos. And again, we're back to the gang showers that aren't used. They're not used and they're leaking. Here's some more flooring issues. The one on the bottom right, that's an entrance mat into the school. And then upgrades to the auditorium chairs should be addressed, as well as acoustics. And again, storage lacking or storage being used in spaces that it's not designated. And we talked a little bit last meeting about the weight room and the access to it. So some of the clearances around the equipment were noted as maybe not ideal. Talked about this a little bit at the last meeting with the technology in the electronics lab. And then the band room had the risers, which they did not meet current code. Wrestling mat storage seemed to be an issue. And with the older bleachers, there are no ADA compliant seats in those bleachers. And those should be motorized. And then the space that we're in now, that arrow is in the wrong spot. It should be over at this door over on this side.
I think the mats are just stored during the season, and they're stored outside of there. So they're inside. There's crevices within the gym, I believe, that they're stored. So that's really not.
That's actually our third competition mat.
Okay.
So we throw out 3 mats. We usually put them up in the upstairs storage off cafeteria. Instead of going up and down steps multiple times, we bring it back. And then at the end, we'll either wheel them into the wrestling room, or we take them back up the steps. Now that area's been cleaned out from the old cafeteria. That's why it's important.
Locker rooms were in good condition, but there were no ADA lockers or ADA benches. Flooring in the corridors seem to be in pretty good condition. Casework in the science labs, very similar to what we were discussing at the other schools. This is a little bit of an the peninsulas or the islands, a little bit of an outdated layout. Does not offer the flexibility sometimes that teachers are looking for. Team room was in excellent condition. But you'll see that one door that exits out. It's not the most energy efficient just to exit right out of that space. Typically, you might see like some type of corridor leading back to the team room before you get to the exterior exit. Cafeteria recently went through a flooring renovation, looked to be in good condition. However, the ceiling was old and acoustics could be a concern. Yes? Yeah. TV studio seemed to be was in good shape. Media center, same as the other two schools. It's a variety of furniture systems, and there's difficulty moving that furniture around into those to those different layouts and group activities that the librarian, I'm sure, would like to have. Here's the wood shop. One of the things that we suggested, or actually I think this was actually a comment that was made to us, is if it had an exterior overhead door, could have better access in and out of the space for bringing materials in and out. And then again, in the music room, some of the risers and some of the other furniture in there were not conducive to that flexibility that you may be looking for. So as far as the high school site, very similar to the other schools. The one is that what's very unique is that you have a public road running right in front of the school. And you don't have that space for those two separate driveways of the buses and the parents dropping off right at that main entrance. This may be we may not be able to develop an option for this because it's a public road, but we will certainly take a look at it. One of the other comments on here was that the tennis court surface was past the age of its life expectancy, but it was noted that wasn't used a lot.
Just community.
But that should be looked at being repaired. And then I did mention that there was a stormwater drainage issue coming off of the mountain back into this corner. So we would recommend something to divert that storm water away from the building.
can I just add one comment
Sure.
about the road? The part that kills me is when I don't mind if I'm coming to the school and I take the main entrance and I drive through that horrible parking lot and then I drive out of the parking lot to go back into the parking lot. But what kills me is that people that live in this development here, that's how they get home.
Yeah.
They drive through that parking lot where our students are. They are not part of our district, and they're driving through there. I would love a realistic way to stop that from happening. I mean, even before they redid the parking lots where that was student parking and it was just like a gravel parking lot, and then they had the other parking lot for teachers. but I hate when I'm here at the school and people are going through that parking lot and then go up Susquenita Hill. Nothing against the people at Susquenita Hill, it's just unnecessary traffic to me. It's unnecessary traffic that's going through our parking lot with our student drivers and stuff that aren't coming to the school.
And in terms of student drop-off in the high school, students aren't being dropped off on Susquenita Hill Road,
No, it's
though.
over on this, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, like, we don't have student cars pulling up on Susquenita Hill Road and dropping them off. I just didn't know if he was aware of that. Well, yeah. Yeah. So the buses are being dropped off over by the gym, so that's separate, but, because I'm thinking you probably don't have as many parent drop-offs in the high school, because by junior year, some, but sophomore year, they're driving to school. Yeah. Really?
Yeah.
Tina, what are you referring to when they're coming up? Are you talking about, does they come along up by the stadium and then up around? Okay.
Those parking spots right there along the sidewalk are student parking. So that's our parking lot, that's not a road. That, it didn't used to be a road, that's the parking lot.
It used to be a road, came right off of I-15, straight up to the front door of the high school.
Yeah, and then you could turn either way.
Right.
But now you can't go up to the high school and turn either way, go into that public road, you drive through our parking lot.
But is that road for a school property? I didn't think it was.
It is our parking.
Oh, I did not know.
Right up until they hit schoolhouse road.
Just like we even.
Can we stop you? No, I can't answer that question.
I mean, what do they do like with like businesses that don't want people coming through their businesses all the time, right? Because it's a cutoff. Don't they have? Yeah, I guess.
I think the answer to the question would be if we were to stop, like if we were to put gates up or something, I think it would endanger, if emergency vehicles had to come on our property to, and it would endanger the community, it would also endanger our students if we needed to get someone there to get like, that type of thing.
Yeah.
Right, we would have a liability problem, I think, if we were to do that. We could put signs up, but I think that'd be the only.
We have clients that will put demountable gates. If you want, we always recommend having emergency vehicle access around the building, but in a lot of times, you want to discourage whether it's parents or whether it's people that are using a school property as a drive-through, to prevent them from going on those emergency drives. They'll just put demountable gates up on either end. There's potentially that option too. Well, you'd have to do, well, it'd become a maintenance issue because then you may have, maybe one of those things where you're opening them and closing them every day.
But, and now that the masonry place is in, they're destroying Schoolhouse Road. Yeah, and so that's gonna
With their
cause
trucks.
people to use that entrance more than ever.
But how many people live on Susquenita Hill? Like, I mean, it's not like we're talking about a development that, I mean, I've been up there, trust me, so I don't think, I mean, we're not talking like a development going,
And they're trying to.
Sure, I think there's
Yeah.
lots of different
Goes up
traffic
and then
patterns
it-
that we
it
can
goes-
certainly look at as we get going, but I think, it's either diverting traffic down through there or diverting it across Schoolhouse. It's still going in front of one of our buildings and one of our facilities. So it's taking a look at maybe what that is. And part of what we could always do is anytime the engineers could take a closer look and look at traffic patterns and flows,
Yeah.
which traffic patterns and flows actually counts the amount of vehicles, right?
Yep.
Counts the cars and takes a look at what is best and what is the best actual flow. But that's something, certainly I think we have respectfully some other concerns that we need to address. But that could be something along the way, that we look at. And as different things change, so could the flow, yeah.
I don't know an answer, that's why I thought if
Absolutely.
engineers knew more about flow and stuff.
Hey, I love the fact that he's here and we're taking advantage of some of his expertise while he's here. I love free advice.
Well, what's good is when we present what these deficiencies are to you, and then maybe there's some that you agree with, and you give feedback, and we say, okay, when we start looking at the options, these were some of the things that the board commented on that we want to make sure that we're addressing and make it a priority. HVAC system, also a geothermal heat pump system, all similar to the elementary schools. One thing to note was the boilers would most likely need to be replaced in the next 5 to 10 years. Plumbing systems, again, we suggest some due diligence of scoping the plumbing lines. The domestic water, though, there were some improvements done to the domestic water main line coming in the building where it's not the same issue as the elementary and the middle school. But again, all pretty much similar to the other buildings, you know, replacing the fixtures and the faucets, upgrading to ADA compliant fixtures, and then considering potentially a sprinkler system. So for electrical, a little bit more with the lighting and controls. Some of the down lights, we would recommend replacing those with LED fixtures, making upgrades to the auditorium, having occupancy sensors in classrooms that will turn on and off the lights in those rooms. Making sure that you have GFI receptacles in the required spaces, having dedicated data closets, and then also making some upgrades to your stage lighting for the auditorium. So I know that was a lot that I went over. I mean, we have these reports. Scott has been very helpful, giving a lot of comments. Hope when we're complete with them, we're 2/3 of the way complete with these. We will send them to him first and get his feedback before it's finalized. But we really want to make sure that he has reviewed this before it's finalized.
A comment, I think a large priority or a high priority should be the gymnasium,
Which one?
both of them. I kill myself when I walk up and down.
And when you're saying that, I think it's the bleachers that you're
Yes,
referring
the bleachers,
to.
yes.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I have another question. I was curious as to, when you were looking at the middle school, what the thought was on the entrance doors. So very interestingly, they have mirrored glass, and you can see in, but you cannot see out when you're, so it's almost reverse of what it's supposed to be,
So
because,
Dr. Fox and I we've had this conversation before. I do by no means want to give you different advice as if you had a security director that made that suggestion, but we would think that a best practice is to not put the mirrored glass, because what it does is it can potentially prevent, if you're looking out of the school, if there is a potential intruder, that you could not see them. So the visual sight lines from the interior to the exterior are cut off. And we think that that's a supervision issue.
And conversely, go ahead.
So respectfully, in terms of like safety and security, I would rather us talk about that privately and personally than here publicly. Nope, that's a great question, but absolutely.
Now, there are security cameras, so that's covered. And then with those sight lines at the front doors, yeah, we'll look at those and then we can review those with you. We would want to look at any assessments done that the district has had done before. So the next steps, this is what I made some assumptions here on when we develop the options, we're going to develop options based on these 7 bullet points. And this can be a discussion with the board, but I did review these with Dr. Fox. This was kind of like our first pass through, that we're going to develop options where there is minimal growth in the district with the enrollment projections. We're going to develop options where your current capacity can meet any of that minimal growth. It supports your projected enrollment. We will develop options that address the educational program deficiencies that we looked at the last meeting. In some cases, we may be able to carve out space within the existing building to address those deficiencies. In other cases, we may have to put additions onto the building to address those deficiencies. We want to make sure that we're upgrading or replacing some of those noted MEP systems. We want to comply with ADA. We want to comply with current building code requirements. Any of these options, we are focusing on student health and safety as well as staff. And then we also want to put options together that provides the district financial stability and then also aligns with any capital improvement projects that you have planned in the next 5 years.
Are these in any particular order of priority? Would you like us to do that?
They're all the priority, I think, yes. So we want to make sure that we're addressing all of them. It's not one is more than the other.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as we move forward, we'll have some discussions and we'll get some more information. If we have clarifying information we need, we'll certainly reach out to Mr. Colstock to get that information. And kind of from there, kind of formulate our own little think tank to decide what avenues and what our next steps that we want to take. Oh,
Yes.
sorry.
No, that's fine. So next month, we'll start showing you some options that we've developed. Then we would come back in May and share with you the estimates for that. What we'll do is those estimates, we'll have a construction cost estimate, but we also anticipate there's just more than the construction cost. There's the soft cost. So we'll include that so you have a total project cost. And then Dr. Fox and I were discussing that maybe then in June, that's when the board starts some type of deliberation and discussion on what are the next steps? How do you make a decision if you move forward with any of these options?
I was just going to comment. I noticed at one point you did talk about the location of like our auxiliary gym and like we have a dark room that's not being utilized and some other storage areas that are not being utilized, and the whole creation of a space for the theater arts program as well as our weight room where it's located. So some of those things weren't covered at all tonight, but will they be under perhaps the educational needs of the building? Is that where they might fall in?
That's exactly where they would fall under.
Okay.
So those educational program deficiencies, yep.
So I think that's a really good segue because all of those things we talked about from way back when we talked about enrollment to where we are now, kind of putting some of those options together to take a look at all of those elements as well. And lots of discussions to be had moving forward to see. And again, this is a really good comprehensive report that we have, and we have a lot of different options that we can move forward with.
Just another quick question. So let's say we want to do some things but not other things. If we want to do some things because they involve the educational, instructional or educational component, but we don't want to upgrade our septic system or something, by upgrading one thing, are we going to be then out of code for something else?
Potentially. So depending on the level of renovation, the building code has 3 levels of renovation. So you can almost look at it as more of like a minor, a moderate, and a more extensive. Depending on that level of renovation, you may be okay with not upgrading other items that are deficient. But once you start getting into some of the moderate or some of the more extensive renovations, then you would be required to address those code deficiencies.
Which would be theoretically huge.
Potentially. For example, once you start putting additions onto the building, we then need to look at the fire areas of the building. Right. Okay? Because let's say the high school, you probably would need, with the size of the high school, you probably need to break it up into 3 different fire areas. So one way we could address that is we could put firewalls. There's probably already firewalls within it. We would tie into the existing ones.
I think yeah, you answered.
But then there's the possibility you would then put a sprinkler system in as well to, that kind of causes that kind of that domino effect. So we would put options together maybe for one or the other, or make recommendations. So. Any other questions? I know that was a lot.
So a few things I took just real quick is the first thing, while there's some deficiencies, what I saw is also some cleanliness. And I want to give a big shout out to our maintenance and custodial team, because while our buildings are 20 plus years old, they're really well maintained. And I noticed that when we were walking through, Larry pointed that out, and several others who came here, when we walked through the buildings, to notice the upkeep throughout. So a lot of square footage. I look at it a lot like a home inspection, and I know I still have a punch list from about 18 years ago when we moved in. So we're working on some of those items in my house. So Mrs. Fox, if you're listening, I'll get to those.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. All right, just kind of segueing in real quick. I don't have a formal presentation on this, but it's just our board meeting schedule starting in August of 2023. Kind of the same format with policy committee meetings, working through our policies and our policy framework. And the only kind of outlier or change is really December of 2023. There will be no policy meeting and no caucus meeting, just because, number one, it's December, and number two, it's reorganization of the board during that time. So what I'll do is we'll make sure you get this before next Tuesday to review and see if you have any questions pertaining to the calendars.
He doesn't have one.
July is scheduled, but you can always cancel at your discretion. I think we should have a party, yeah. All right, let's roll into the annual budget overview for March's caucus. One thing I do want to note is we are scheduled for 2 budget workshop meetings on March 21st and again on March 28th. So we'll have some fun with some Tuesdays, kind of going 14, 21, and 28. Kind of working through. So this is a generalized overview. And then again, you'll work through some of those items, please, as you take a look, and ask and put in some of those questions when you have during that time. And we'll work through as a team and try to answer some of those questions as you go through some of those items. So I just want to start out right at the beginning with our mission again of our school district. So our school district, in partnership with parents, teachers, community members, is dedicated to providing a safe and enriching learning environment that establishes high expectations and incorporates rigorous academics, utilizes progressive technology, and focuses on developing the whole student so he or she may become a lifelong learner and make positive contributions to our diverse world. So it's important that we always start out, because our mission is driven by our budget, and that's really important, right? As we kind of breathe life into this budget, to breathe life into our mission statement as we continue. So some of our budget developmental goals is to continue to enhance and maintain our curriculum offerings for our students. It's also to maintain and enhance our facilities and work to provide a budget that is financially responsible. So again, no easy task, right? Some of our budget restraints for 23-24 continue to be our cyber charter payments. And you'll see some graphics that we are going to provide here within the next couple of slides. Special education costs continue to rise as did some of the challenges associated with providing, providing the needs of students is our responsibility and one we take very seriously and one we want to. And yet some of the needs continue, and providing some of those, providing for some of those needs continues to rise in cost. Our utilities continue to rise in cost just like they do with each homeowner, right? I know I opened my electric bill the other day and it was really unfortunate. I shouldn't have opened it. And we look at liquid propane as well. These resources continue to rise. And as we continue with our last year of our brokered electricity deal, partnership and contract, we're continuing to look at other options as well. And some of those options I'll just share continue to be, as Mr. Bart has done a good job, we continue to look at solar as an option to see what that looks like for our district. And those things take a little bit of time to be able to do, but yet we're still committed to work on making sure that it's the right partnership for us if that's an avenue we want to take. Salary and benefits and PSERS continues to be, probably when we look at the pie chart here, is our main, one of our main areas. And inflation costs. I know I always joke about that, but it is real. It's real when I go to the grocery store, it's real when I go to different places, and all of us experience that as well throughout. Inflation is a realistic item currently in our economy. One of the drivers that, again, I know I stressed last time and I'll continue to, is the unfunded cyber charter mandate that comes through. This right here in and of itself, historically, take a look, please. At 19 and 20, you'll see we had about 139 students enrolled, and I broke it down into special education separate. That's the total student enrollment, and then you'll see special education students because there is a higher cost associated with special education student who goes to a cyber charter school. In 2020, sir.
Is the 27 special ed count a part?
Yeah, it's part of the student enrollment and then just broken down separate. Yep. 2021, you'll see that number rose to 258. Obviously, lots of things going on throughout the United States during that time. 21, 22, you started to see a drop back to 228 students. And in 22, 23, our current, we're at 182. I'd like to get back to pre-1920 numbers and like to get some assistance from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania to begin to fund something that needs a total rehaul and some help with our legislators, to put some steps in place within the school code to address this.
Dr. Fox, I will be attending the PSBA day on the House on April. My only disappointed that it's online and not in person. I was looking forward to storming the ramparts.
Thank you, Dr. Rubish. And he's referring to the Day of Advocacy. And the Day of Advocacy has been moved to a Day of Advocacy online. But nevertheless, thank you for still attending. And thank you for, on behalf of all of us, to advocate again for us. And any chance that we get, we continue to advocate for a reform of charter school. And if we were to take this number and roughly multiply that, you're going to see that it's going to be close to $2.7 million that we are paying out to cyber charter schools. That number is going to be historically significant as we continue to move through this. This is just a financial chart. I love graphs, and this one just kind of shows the up and down movement. It shows 2010, roughly what we were paying in cyber charter tuition, and you'll see where it goes currently. It ends in 2020. The analytics weren't provided to me with the system that we use currently.
This is per non, is that correct?
That's correct, sir.
It's actually more than that. Our tuition for special ed students is around $25,000 per student.
So double.
Right, approximately, yes. And the numbers are derived from our AFR, our annual financial report, and it's sent to PDE. It's called our PDE 363, and those numbers are easily found on the state's website.
And just in a very consolidated, is that number essentially our budget divided by the number of students? Is that how they determine the cost per student?
No, there's similarly, but not necessarily. No, they do withdraw some different things, and they do take out some grant money and things of that nature, and they do come up with some formula to take out, like the Ready to Learn block grant and stuff like that. So the state does kind of tell us, another thing that the state does, they kind of give us a formula on how to follow, what to do, and it's kind of funny, if you make an error on that form, the charter school CFO sends it back and says it's wrong, and to check it, you know what I mean? So if your numbers are too low or whatever, they do send it, give you a kickback, or if they're too high, they give you a kickback as well. Which, I mean, could be for your benefit if your tuition rates are too high, but that's not really the case here. But so the fact that your budget numbers were well under control during these years keep actually your tuition rates under control as well. So your fiscal constraint that you guys have exhibited over the last 10 years help keep your tuition rates under control as well. Okay.
Yes.
Oh, yes, it varies by district. Every district is different.
I'll go ahead and share one of the strategies, or not strategies, but responsibilities that we have is always to look at the 182 students that attend a cyber charter school. Do they and are they currently living within our residency? We have outstanding to enrollment specialists. So within the next few weeks, we'll be sending out letters to all families to ask them to verify their residency. I think it's within our purview and within our responsibility to check, and anybody who's not within our district will be withdrawn.
So I think I do have a quick question. This is showing how the price per student has fluctuated. And those years where we had those really high numbers, for some reason I'm thinking our charter costs have continually gone up every year, but yet our enrollment dropped down. Am I wrong with that? Or, like, it feels like every year we budget more and more for cyber charter, but we've had a significant drop from 2021 to now in terms of enrollment.
It could be because the special ed numbers didn't really, if you look at if you go back to the special ed numbers, the special ed number went up from 28 to 46, and the special ed is about double what your.
Right, but I'm feeling like every year it's continually gone up, but if you look, the total enrollment's gone from 258 to 229 to 182.
I think in the past, if I looked at past budgets, the budget was woefully behind from 1920 to 21, 2019. So I think they used a smooth average to bring the budget up instead of raggedy and bring the budget, like, so instead of saying you budgeted 1.5 million for cyber charter, and then we're going to smooth average it out and bring it up to 2 million, or instead of going from 1.5 to 3 million, they brought a smooth average up. So like you saw, like the curve went smooth, slow moved up. Instead of doing it like by your actuals, because what happens in cyber charter is similar to what could happen in special ed, is you don't know what cyber school kids you're going to receive in there. Also, during that time, you created a cyber program of your own to help offset some of those costs so when you create your own cyber program, those tuition rates that we talk about no longer exist, because you're not paying that same tuition cost. You're absorbing that cost into your own. You don't have that same cost.
Right.
It's only like when you send them out to a private one. So I think that's why you keep budgeting more and more to it. So that's why you see more and more money budgeted to it. But now you're going to start seeing a decline or a steadying of that number. So like for this year, I didn't budget any more money for cyber charter, or it might even been a little bit less. I think it was actually $100,000 less, because of the fact that we have less students going there than we did in the past. Because some of the students have either graduated, they've moved, or I know that our principals have gotten some students back into our program. So I think that's, but in the interim, while they were trying to catch up, the budget went sky high, and instead of just saying we're going to go from 1.5 to 3 million in 1 year, and then all of a sudden you guys go from like a $33 million expenditure line to a $35 million expenditure line in 1 year, I think it was a smooth, gradual step up and say, we'll just take the hit and make up for it in other areas. I think that's kind of what the process and the mindset was. I'm sorry, Dr. Fox.
No, don't be silly. Thank you very much. Taking a look at some of the financial challenges that face public schools, this report was really interesting. It came out just recently by the Pennsylvania School Boards Association, the State of Education Report. And so these are some of the top financial challenges that face public schools throughout the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And this one had the triple star because it was the most popular. It was the mandatory charter school tuition payments. And not paying a charter school tuition payment is not an option because they take it directly from our subsidy. Special education costs, pension costs, inadequate state funding, general inflation, health insurance rates, and facility maintenance rounds out the top challenges that face public schools from the State of Education Report. And I think we can all say that these are relative challenges, that we are no different. Going into some new budget item highlights, you'll see this year there's not a ton of new budget highlight items. So the highlight reel is a little bit smaller. Phone system replacement, that is certainly a must. Our phone system is no longer going to be serviceable. And we are looking, and Mrs. Matash has done a great job and her team of providing some really competitive quotes. And that's something that we are going to, in April, present, because it's something we certainly need to move on in order to be able to have the phones ready to go for once our service agreement runs out and these phones are no longer serviced. The baseball field backstop repair, it's something we want to take a look at. We're actually going to take some quotes right now to see what that costs to get that repaired. Linkit is a data warehousing software. So we have a lot of different data out there and data points in a multitude of different systems. What this does is it provides a one-stop shopping and allows all of our teachers, school counselors, intervention specialists, principals to be able to use data to make informed decisions, including special education, without having to go to multiple systems. It really links things together pretty well.
Are we going to talk?
Sure. The backstop, what we're looking at is it's starting to lean and it needs to be looked at in terms of that. Is that accurate in saying that? So it's safe to say we're still exploring options as to what the best option is to be able to utilize for that baseball. But we know we want to address it, it's fair to say.
I mean, we want to make it, we don't want to just do something crappy, but we also don't necessarily want to replace it if we can make it safe, so.
He was here today when Len was
So what number am I hearing ballpark on that? There was no number. I mean, we talking hundreds of thousands, $100,000 or $4,000? 10,000? Okay, well, no, because I'm like looking at,
$10,000 was the item number in the budget.
so,
There's also a couple of people in the community that would contribute.
yes, I'm just looking at there was 4,000 budgeted last year, but I don't see anything budgeted this year.
I'll have to take a look at that. I'm sorry.
And while you're talking about that, I know last year or the year before, during either the Tri-Valley or Pico meet, the discus cage, this went out, a discus went out and hit somebody. I was gonna say, was that done?
That was like before last year.
Okay, just, since we're talking about cages.
So, like, what does this need to be? Because, like, I can just Google it. I mean, I can Google it and find out that they're anywhere between, like, 6,500 and 8,700 for a full 10 by 10 or 20 by 10 backstop. I mean, we're talking high school. I mean, I love baseball, don't get me wrong. So,
A 10 by 10 or a 20 by 20
this is,
isn't adequate. Little clamshell types.
no, I'm looking at a 20 by 10
Bingley.
with full hood,
The
permanent baseball, softball,
backstop is
basketball.
line item
20 by
997
10
in the
with
budget.
full hood, permanent baseball, softball, backstop.
There's no way.
20 by 10. 20 feet.
Oh, I moved it to line 997.
20 feet. Right here.
All right, well, obviously, we're not ready to have this conversation, so.
All right.
I was curious about the Linkit, Dr. Fox. The Linkit software. Explain that to me. We have Canvas, we have PowerSchool, we have this information management system within, and these are, PowerSchool is supposed to be so powerful. Now we're going to invest money on Linkit. Explain to me exactly what that is.
Sure. PowerSchool is the student information system that harnesses our attendance software, that allows us to do enrollments, that allows us to have the information, that houses the curriculum, the transcripts, grades, we run report cards, attendance, demographics, safe schools, all the state mandated reporting. What Linkit does is all of the Acadians testing we use for benchmarking, all of those benchmark assessments that we use, the information from iReady, standardized testing data, different data sources that are out there and in multiple platforms.
So is it like a performance tracker?
Yeah, but much more robust.
Okay,
So,
what are we doing now?
We do not have a system now. We use multiple platform systems to try to get information out, and then we spend a lot of time trying to put them into Excel spreadsheets and manipulating the Excel spreadsheets and after spreadsheet after spreadsheet.
And how did this, I'm sorry, how did this become how did we become aware this was a need?
Great question. So we used to have performance tracker for years, and I know a bunch of us in the district office looked at usage reports. We know that it's an outdated system that they were not updating. Very hard to use, very cumbersome. Our teachers were not using it. So we definitely took it out of the budget last year because we just weren't ready to make a decision on where we wanted to go in the future. But looking at Linkit, we've looked at several different data warehousing systems. This one, like Dr. Fox said, is very robust, does all of those things, but then it also provides us help with looking at our MTSS processes with interventions, behavior, just puts it all in one place that we are able to analyze these things and get faster outcomes.
So as part of it, does it have the early warning dashboard for students? So like you can put in, here's the criteria I want to look for, and
Yeah,
It'll,
I
you know,
feel like
red flag
that's what we're gonna
kids
be able to
and-
build within there. I know there's other systems you can buy for early warning dashboards. And you brought up Power School, which segues into, they have a system that you can purchase as an add-on. But I know just from looking with other districts at the IU, things that we've talked about at our monthly meetings, definitely not up to par. So, and they are all very comparable in price.
Now,
So-
where would this be, how would this link with our special education data?
Good point. And that stuff we're actually working through now, just piloting it, trying to work with they're giving us a free pilot, a free
Okay.
chance to just take a look at everything in the system. So we're working through that, and hopefully we'll have that ready to go for us to take a look at very, very soon. But
What's the price tag on that? I'm just curious.
The price tag I think we budgeted for, correct me if I'm wrong, was 17,000.
but it's not that every year. The first year in any implementation, you always have a little bit more
Right.
of cost. And looking at what we used to budget for performance tracker was about 15,000 a year.
Years ago, yeah.
Yeah.
And our counselors would be able to look at, of
yeah.
course, hopefully
Great
would be
question.
looking at data. Okay.
And I really like the idea that we're gonna test drive it. And if it doesn't do what we expect it to do, then we don't move forward with it too. Just because it's in doesn't mean we're gonna purchase as a cost control mechanism if it doesn't do what we need it to do. And the last kind of highlight item that I kind of picked apart, and there might be some more highlight items, I just made a highlight reel, certainly is the event tractor. This is kind of the Swiss, am I allowed to say that? Swiss Army knife tool that has multiple attachments and can be multiple purposed and used. One of the things that we're significantly missing right now is the use of a forklift, and to be able to take items on and off storage, and to take items on and off a tractor trailer. This has forklift attachments, but we're not just relegated then just to a forklift. This gives us flexibility to use for snow removal. Will give us flexibility to rent different attachments that can be quickly attached and used. And it's really based upon hydraulics. Good for students to study when you look at the use of hydraulics in farm systems, but that's a different story. But this piece of equipment really is going to replace four into one. Is that right, Mr. Howe? 3 into 1, sorry.
I also wanted to point a clarification that was asked by Mrs. Singley, very well noted. Line item 956 on your budget, the baseball backstop there was $4,000 budgeted in the fiscal year 2023 for the replacement and repair or replacement of the backstop. It says replace, but I looked up the original language that was included in last year's budget. It said repair/replace of the baseball backstop. That money has not been expended in this year's budget, so it is still there. As always, Quiggs does a phenomenal job managing his budget nearly to the dime. And so that line item is now in your budget packs as 997, the baseball backstop. Because I like making double work for myself, I added that extra lines because, I'm just awesome like that. So just to give you guys that realization, so if we were able to find if the quotes come in a reasonable price, we would be able to move forward on that for the spring season this year. With finding extra money that was in Quiggs's budget or in the maintenance budget, we might be able to move forward on that and remove it from this year's budget, if that would be at the board's discretion. But I just wanted to bring that point up before we move on to the next slide, is that Mrs. Singley had asked me about that before, so I just wanted to bring that up, so maybe that'll resolve a question when you guys are reviewing this. Thank you.
Depending on the size of the backstop, a 54-foot one runs from $12,000 to $17,000 just for the backstop.
How often do you have to replace the net? And how often do we have to budget? But
Yeah,
I've
the
still
one we
seen
have-
those
How
out.
old is the one we have, though? That's the one we have is not that old, is it? The backstop, yeah, I don't know.
But I've still seen those outdoor nets disintegrate.
Oh, is it? Okay.
I mean, it's.
Yeah, I don't know.
UV light is still going to degrade something over time.
And
So
it's
at what
falling
point?
apart.
So if for some reason he doesn't have the extra money in the budget, is there a way to just?
I can move money,
Yeah.
I can move money from, Scott's gonna kill me, Scott's budget. That's why I smirked at him because he was making eye contact with me when I said this. Scott does a great job, and so I will tell you guys one thing real quick before we move on. Scott in his maintenance budget and his supply budget has done a phenomenal job at repurposing cleaning chemicals and using our grant money that we had from COVID to repurpose cleaning chemicals and purchase, because they don't go bad very quickly. And he has done a phenomenal job at keeping them and making sure we're using them very effectively. And so that is why we've had a lot of ability to have some extra wiggle room in there for these type of I want to say similar, somewhat emergency type of things if the board discretion to do these type of things. And Dr. Fox is going to hit me with his hand. So I'm going to let him go on with his next slide presentation.
All right, just kind of an overview of our budget expenses currently right now. Total expenditures is approximately $36,561,732. Again, continued drivers of cyber tuition, salaries and benefits, special education costs. You'll see health insurance increases. So our health insurance, we've been fortunate this year. We have a 6.26% increase, which is the smallest in our consortium trust. And salary increases are contractual. It's important to note that in 2025, the collective bargaining agreement with the association ends. And in 2024, so next summer, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself, the Act 93 agreement is also due. Special education is again, we see an increased number of placements and related services that are needed for our students. So let's take a look a little bit at our expenses chart. So the expenses chart, I love a good pie chart. You'll see the orange located is salary and benefits, and you'll see the amount broken down there. The next number is tuition and transportation. So that's transportation, what we pay in our transportation agreement, as well as tuition, which is tuition to cyber charters, tuition also, I believe, to our career and technical education program, and any tuition that we may pay for a student that attends any other placement. So that falls under that, I want to say that's green color there located. The next is going to...
The olive brown one, the second biggest slice.
I need better colors, yeah, sorry. My fault.
They didn't give us good color choices when it came to doing this.
So the next is going to be our professional services. Professional services is 2.951, and then we're going to see from there our debt service, which is 2.482, and then from there our supplies budget, which is the smallest number of $1,457,299. And it was interesting when we did supplies and we broke that number down, it came to a little about $3 per day per student.
Would you define professional services?
Professional services is all the services that we receive not only from the CAIU, but any professional services that are purchased for like professional development, any of our audit services, any of our things that might not even be anything that are relatable to the student, like any support staff or not support staff service, not staff, any support services that had to be purchased out from an outside agency. So anything that we don't do, anything that's not in-house. So would be, if we had to contract out with somebody, so any cleaning agencies or anything like that, that would be professional services, and that's that nature type of thing. So that would be like if we had to have an OT agency come in or things of that nature. That's where that would come in. That would be That's part of the reason that number is very large and relative is due to our special education increased services because our OT and PT services are expensive. And that's why that number increasingly grows over time. So that's one of the reasons why that number is substantially lower. To add on the tuition services, also HACS tuition is in there. I don't want to, that's 190,000, but the tuition we pay for the Cumberland Perryville Tech is in there. I'm sorry, Career and Technical Center, I apologize. And the cyber charters in there. Our transportation for all of our transportation, including athletic events and special events are in there. It seems like an overwhelmingly large number, but in reality, that's a very big pot, and if I were going to break that pot down, there'd be a million little pie slices in there. So that's why it's not broken down into that. And we can move on to the next slide. I wanted to bring up something about the health insurance trust, just to be quick. The reason that you guys are going to see in your budget books as well about why why things declined substantially from last year in your benefits piece is because last year it was budgeted around 10.5% as an increase. This year I gave a much more realistic picture of we only had a 6.5% increase. This year was 6.26, so we've had 2 very good years of health insurance claims. So I'm budgeting a realistic number and not an over number of that. And we've had the smallest in our risk sharing pool. So.
Thank you. Overview of projected revenue. Projected revenue for 23-24, and again, the word projected is important to note, is $34,182,270.31, and it's based on the May 2022 assessment data from Perry and Dauphin County. So it's important to note, as we had stated several times, that we're a multi-county district. We have townships in both Perry and Dauphin County. So it's important to note that the state tax equalization board comes into play during this time. And as a multi-county tax district, millage rates are subject to change every year regardless of the tax, of any tax increase, because of being a multi-county school district operating in both Perry and Dauphin County. We're required each year to rebalance our millage rate using an approved baseline method that's in the school code. Multi-county school districts are sensitive to both assessed values and market values, which we get provided to us from both Perry and Dauphin counties, usually several times before they're finalized in May. There will always be a change based on market value increases. As one rate changes in one, the other changes as well. So it's kind of that seesaw or teeter-totter effect that sometimes does occur. Taking a look at the revenue chart, you'll see the revenue broken down here from local, state, and federal. Local sources are approximately $16,780,000, state revenue at $16 million, and federal revenue being $1,331,000. So you'll see the pie chart representing that as well. Do you want me to go back? Taking a look at county millage comparisons, this is from 2023, real estate millage rates. This is just a comparison. This came from the Pennsylvania State Equalization Board. You'll see our neighbors. I'm just looking at Perry County, the tax county in general. You'll see Greenwood at 14,840. This is just for comparative purposes, not to put any of our friends within the county under the spotlight here. But Newport School District at 16,115, West Perry at 14,350, and us at 12.599. Moving ahead to budget comparison from last year, if we took a look at last year's budget, we budgeted for $35,991,796. This year, it's $36,561,732, and still changing. The change, or the nexus between the two, is $569,935. So I think it's important to also note that this includes the $2 an hour wage increase for support staff in here. So I think I do want to kind of thank Mr. Bard for his hard work on this and the team's hard work on this, because it is a team, really a team commitment to get the budget with, looking at inflation and current cost and still increasing by $2 an hour to be at a change of around this particular number. Overalls as of March of,
Can I ask a quick question?
yeah.
I had requested some information which you sent us concerning amount budgeted and deficit. Do you remember you know what I'm talking about?
Yep, it's coming.
Well, you sent us some stuff.
Yep.
But it wasn't quite, what I would like, if you can go back, what I would be interested in is, we budgeted that amount last year, and of that amount, we were budgeting a deficit of X amount.
Yes, sir.
And we finished the year, or were projected to finish the year with either a plus or a minus of X amount. I'd like to see that back like 3 or 4 years, because to the credit of our business managers, I think our budget is coming out more correct. I think if we are budgeting a $1 million deficit, we are coming out at the end of the year closer to what we projected. Once upon a time, we would be budgeting a $2 million deficit, and Phil would remember this, and we would come out $3 million in the plus, which is how we ended up with this huge fund balance. So I think now that we are budgeting a deficit and coming out closer to what we're actually budgeting, I think it behooves us to take in these budget meetings to take more notice to what we're budgeting, because it's closer to reality. Does that make sense?
Yep, and I think we're gonna address that slide that you're asking for here relatively soon.
And on top of it all, then, minus the ESSER's amount that's in there, which this year's like $600,000 or $700,000. What?
Yeah, looking at some of the offsets, again, we didn't add any positions with the use of the American Rescue Plan. Yeah, ARP, ESSER's funding. We used it for revenue to offset some of the costs. So roughly around $600,000 is in revenue. So when we look at the deficit, yes, you can kind of project next year that $600,000 will not be in revenue.
Our school psychs and some of those things are from ESSER's, correct?
They were, yes.
Yes.
Yes. Those are categories that we used as revenue to offset some of the costs. But those weren't positions added. They were already positions that were in the budget. So, yes, they were eligible to be used for
We're not adding
ESSERs.
positions, but we're paying for positions
Yes,
through
sir.
ESSERs, which we will still have to pay.
Yes, sir.
When that money
And we
goes
were
away.
paying prior to it. Yes,
It's
sir.
not like a sidewalk, which obviously we don't need the next year, but it's a salary which will continue to be in our budget.
But it goes back to my point that the year prior to that, we did not fill those positions because we didn't have the money, and we did not fill those positions until we had the ESSER's money.
Did we not fill them because of the money, or did we not fill them because we couldn't find the
So
resource?
we didn't,
We decided not to fill them in 2019.
Some of those, Phil, not all of them. But we need to have a school psychologist. We cannot afford, we're legally not allowed to not evaluate people with a school
Well,
psychologist.
no, I'm not saying all 7 of them or whatever it is. I'm talking about the 5.
Yeah, some.
The two that we added.
Yeah, well, I think me might be, but I understand what you're saying. Okay.
Can I ask another question? Quick question. So in terms of the ESSERs, just looking at revenue, I just had a quick revenue question. So when I see in there $855,000 from ESSERs 3 that's in our revenue stream for this next year, the next year after that, or whenever that ESSERs money runs out, that will no longer be a revenue
There's going to be
stream.
some revenue, residual revenue left over, but some of that revenue that's in there is for one-time expenses. So those one-time, we're talking about revenue that, what Dr. Fox is mentioning is the one-time revenue that is paying, that's offsetting expenditures for personnel that is in the budget right now. So there's one-time expenses, I think, in there for, I forget what the one-time expenses are. I forget what the roof, not the roof, yeah, the roof is the one, the roof is the $400,000. So that's what some of that money that's in there for right now is for the roof.
I guess what I'm wondering is, like, when I'm thinking for the next year, would I have to expect that I'm going to have another $800,000 worth of deficit? But you're saying no, because this is just like a
no,
one-time.
that's what Dr. Fox's point is that there's going to be, the deficit, your anticipation should be the deficit will be higher, but it won't be higher because there was any new positions added. It will be because the revenue piece is missing because the federal money is starting to dry up. Am I correct?
Pete, you just said some of that money will be left over. What does?
Because there's some,
Still some that could be used in the
all
next
of
fiscal.
ESSER's will be gone, correct?
I think we have
think
one
there's
more
some
year of
more here.
revenue, of ESSER spend left, but I don't think,
So there will still be money in our budget from ESSER's.
But not.
not $800,000 worth. John has the chart here, I think, for next year.
So ESSER's 3 will more than likely be, ESSER's 3, sorry, will more than likely, we will spend that by 2024, at the conclusion of 2024. So this budget year, you are absolutely correct. That revenue will be in this budget, but moving for next year's fiscal year of 24-25, that revenue will not be in the budget. So unless we get some other subsidies from the federal government or from the Commonwealth, that revenue stream will not be there. So yes, you can probably estimate about 600,000. I can go through and tell you more specifically, and I'll work on that. I did share with you the complete breakdown at one of our notations, and I'll share that out again, where you can see all of that information delineated and broken down specifically per year for what it's used for. But yes, that will not be in revenue.
Sorry.
That's okay.
And is it going to be broken down for one-time costs versus recurring costs that we would have had to pay even if we didn't have the ESSER money?
Absolutely.
So
And
that would-
again, I do want to stress that we went over a lot of the ESSER's plan. So again, I want to make sure that we understand that, yes, there are one-time costs, and then we also took some cost, we utilized some revenue to offset some costs. And I think that's where we're at. So yes, there are one-time costs, such as that beautiful picture we saw of the cafeteria floor. That was used because that floor was difficult in getting clean. That was an eligible item. The controls, some of the roofing was also used under ARP ESSERs. We're using them as eligible items. So there's certain things that are eligible categories, and we just can't spend as we want to. So that's important to note. Number two, one of the things is also to offset some of our iPad leases. We were using that as well. That's in the budget for 23-24.
But before you move on, that's all stuff that we would have had to spend anyway. So we would have taken that money out of our capital expenses and the buildings and whatever that one's called. Yeah. So we would have taken all that money out of there. We were just able to, because of the way of the definition of the money, we were able not to take that out of our fund balance because they gave us the free money.
Yes.
Other schools may have added teachers and all kinds of stuff that now they're going to have to try to figure out how to pay for. We were just paying our regular bills with it, which just keeps us solvent a little bit longer.
Yes.
And I understand why you were using it. You were shifting money around, so to speak, to use it towards a psychologist's salary because that was eligible and something else wasn't. So I understand where it is. It's just knowing that that money ain't going to be there regardless of what we were using it for.
What we didn't want to do, and we all went through, we did not want to add new positions that could not be funded in the future because we didn't add individuals that were only tied to ARP ESSERs. We do have contracted services, but because of the hard work of Ms. Snyder, we were able to procure a grant that actually is going to extend that for social worker a little bit further. So with her hard work, not ESSER's grants, but just individual grants, such as the Department of Justice grant and working with Mrs. Matosh and Mr. Bard, they were able to take that grant, an AASA grant, the Partnership for Better Health, and they roughly earned the district additional revenues of $229,000 because of their hard work of going out and procuring and using that to be able to garner that additional, really to take care of some needs that we wouldn't necessarily be able to take care of. So good work and kudos. Yeah, so looking at our budget comparison, overall, as of like right now, March of 2023, we're projected a deficit of $2.43 million is projected. So you're going to see a chart we're going to share here in a second. Historically, this is about where we've been in this process. So here's a historical overview chart, and then we're going to get a little bit more granular. That's going to talk about where we projected and where we ended up. So 18 and 19, taking a look, about 1.3, 1.6, 2021, 2.1, 2021, 22, sorry, 3 million, and 22, 23, the deficit was about 2.3 million. And what I'll do is I'll share this whole slide deck with you too, because this is a lot of information that I'm kind of going through at a rapid pace.
Dr. Fox, stay on this for a second.
Okay.
I would like to point out to really, when you guys look at this budget, it's almost like you're asking a guy with 1% body weight to 1% body fat to go on a diet. When you're looking at this budget, when you're asking for different things, because when you look at the cost of inflation over the last 3 years has been 7.9, 8.7, and 7.7, and the budget has only gone up approximately. The spending has only gone up about 3 or 4%. You guys have done. It's a very difficult and very challenging to keep the reins on as we have. So I just want you guys and the public to understand that the budget is about as lean as you could possibly. The budget is about as lean as you could possibly get it, and that's to the work that we have done. But when you look at this chart, it just goes to show you where we're at, and that the spending has not gotten that far out of control. You can go further back and see that you have had 34 million. You could see $34 million being spent in 17, 18 as well. So it's not that it's one of those things where you go from 34 to 35 to 37 to 38. You know what I mean? Where you get $1 million a year going up.
I think what Mike is asking, though, is
The next
that.
one.
Oh, do you have another one
That's
then?
coming up. Yeah, we're going.
Okay. Because that's what I'm kind of was curious
Yeah,
about.
we can go to the next one. This is John. Go to the next one.
So I think this is what you're kind of asking for. We kind of put maybe, and if not, we can try to garner historically.
Well, I'm just going to comment to Mr. Bard. As my mother always said, you can't get blood from a stone. And I think we all know. I don't think anyone on this board thinks that we are extravagantly spending or anything. But I've been on this board for 12 years. We've raised taxes one time, so we keep cutting, and we haven't increased our income. And so it becomes a problem with inflation and everything else. So no, I don't think anyone is saying that anyone thinks in any way this district or the administration is spending a lot, because I know we aren't. But when inflation rises and prices go up and we're not having any additional income, it's just a reality of where we are. But I don't think any of us, I think we all know exactly what we're working with.
But I'm not sure that it's a fair statement that we haven't raised income. We didn't raise taxes, but our income has went up. Because we were, when I came on the board, we were like $25 million
Well, I think
budgets.
we've gotten increased amounts from state and federal resources, but
No,
local-
we've gotten increased amount from real estate taxes. Because the value of the homes
Right.
has gone up faster than most of the surrounding
But we
area.
have not, as a board, implemented a tax increase.
Correct.
And our budget will represent that the state did give us $220,000 more in revenue this year, because our subsidies did go up from the state this year.
And we do have like a couple new businesses, like in behind where Carnes is right now. Hopefully those businesses are giving us some revenue. We have, Rudders came in, a couple other places. Hopefully that's helping some.
And do we know yet the new warehousing that's going in Watts, like what the potential tax will be for that increase wise?
Only information I know currently right now is what I read in the newspaper, and I'm not really sure yet the timeline as to when that might go in, where the groundbreaking is, but we're definitely watching that to see, and I'm glad it is located within our district if it does happen, and we'll see what that could bring to the total economy, even bringing some additional opportunities down into the Duncannon area for, I think the paper, and don't quote me, I thought it said potential of 600 jobs. But again, I could have misread that, so please don't quote me on that one.
What I would think would be really cool is if you could take that last line and put it on the slide before. I know you can't do that now, because I think that's what Mike was trying to, like, if I look at 2021, 2022, we had a budget deficit of $3 million, but ended up with $67,000 to the good. And I was wondering, like, going back historically, what did we have as a deficit projected, and then what did we actually end up at the end of the year? Because that, I don't know if that
Just like
would,
basically take this audited end balance column and the use of fund balance column and just add it to the next.
I just take the use of fund.
No.
well,
She,
Yeah, you just
All-
need
all
the,
sh-
what I want to know is,
Mike
did we end
wants
up
to
to the good
know-
or to the bad?
Mike wants to know what the fund balance was supposed to be, and then what it actually was.
Like
No.
1920.
So go back to the previous slide.
What about this next slide? See what the next slide
If
helps.
you got 1.3 million, he wants to know what that number really was.
What did
Like,
we
was
end
it
up with?
0.9 million?
Was it a 0.9 million, or was it where we to the
If
good?
you go to the 1920, 34,
The deficit was a
34,
positive.
just let me finish.
Okay.
34,542,826 was what we projected.
Yeah, we ended up at
And-
32.9.
Were we projecting that would be a deficit?
Yes,
And how much?
It's on the slide before,
at
1.3 million.
So we were projecting a 1.3, so we need to combine those, a $1.3 million deficit, and we actually came out with $181,840 positive.
So it was 1.5 million.
So we projected
Yeah, I'd like to
off
see
by
that.
$1.4 million.
So I caution, and this is one thing I would like to, so this is why I want to caution you guys. I want to caution the board on this. I want to caution the board on this very, very much so on this budget, on the 23-24 budget. I believe those days of this are over.
I think that's true, because that's what we're going to see this year.
Because I think, with the, yeah, because I believe that I've tightened this up, and we've tightened this up as an administration so much so that I think it's going to be that those days of any extra wiggle room and fluff in that are over.
That's my point. So if we are projecting a $2.4 million deficit right now, which has $600,000 of Esser's money in it, then I think what I hear you saying is you're pretty confident that we are going to have a $2.4 million deficit at the end of the year, which in the past, that has not been the case. But I think you guys are doing a better job. So then the question is, uh-oh.
Yeah, so, John and I will work on getting this for one of the budget meetings on the 21st, maybe, showing a better, for that presentation before the questions, to show that, so we can go through that a little bit. So what, I think, I want to get to the fund balance, show this slide. John, let John go through that.
I do want to just kind of appreciate 1 second the historical budget review graphic here with the different colorations, but yeah, we'll move on to the next slide.
Sorry, just one more quick question. Earlier today, Pete, you had said with our revenue thing for our expenditures through February, where do you project it to be by the end of the year? Is that 2.1 still correct?
No, that's the estimated. I didn't put what I think the projection was.
What did you say earlier
I think it's
today?
going to be between 1.6 and 1.8.
Okay.
So I think, that's why I said we're getting very tight to
Yeah.
where, like, it's not like where you budgeted for 2021, 2022, where the deficit was projected at 3 million, or, let's see, 21, 22.
3 million, and then it-
Yeah, 21, and you came in at 67,000 to the positive, where the auditors said, they asked me, they said, that's not normal for that, something like that to happen. What are some of the drivers for this? And we went through an analytical piece to show where the drivers were, and we were able to figure out, where the drivers were. So I don't think that's going to be the norm, moving forward, that you're going to have a much tighter budget. So.
Right. And so we had a 2.3 million projected,
Yeah,
but you're saying it may come in between 1.6 and
1.6,
1.8.
1.6,
Okay.
1.8, maybe 1.5 if we get lucky. But and remember, we've already driven some sources of income up, because when I first got here, you guys were earning $13,000 in interest earning. Now you're going to get $260,000. That's the equivalent of a 2.5% tax increase. So, that's one of the things. So we're going to the well to try to figure out alternative ways to raise income. on that, because I know that you're running out of ways to cut on the other side of the equation.
So your projections, is it based on full employment?
It's based on the employment we have right now.
Not that we don't fill any more positions the rest of
No,
the
but I
year?
want more positions to be
No,
filled.
but
Yeah.
what I'm saying is the 1 point whatever.
Yeah, it's
on
based
full
on-
employment or based on
It's based on
current
if we
enrollment?
filled, it's based on if we filled, it's based on if we filled the positions that we have. If we filled, like as we go along, if we filled, I'm estimating if we filled half of the positions that we have now. Because I don't think we're gonna fill all of them, so I'm basing it on like, if we had 3 or 4 hires for paraeducators. And I know at some point we're gonna say, probably April 1st, or I'm gonna say no more purchases. We're gonna have a spend freeze only on emergency purchases. So anything that principals need, anything like that's gonna be stopped, unless they need anything major. And then that's gonna be the end of it. And we're also gonna have, we're, at the end of the year, we're not gonna hire any paraeducators in May. I mean, there's gonna be no reason to hire them for 2 months, or 2 weeks. So, I'm just going by, so I'm saying about maybe half. Yeah. Yeah, sorry, John, go ahead.
Next slide is a historical review of fund balance projected, and you'll see as of June 30th of 2021 to the far left-hand side, as well as the use of fund balance from 2022, use of fund balance as of 2023. And that is, of course, 2023, as we finish up this fiscal year and get audited, that's projected. And then the projection out for the far right is the current fiscal year, and what that would take, and what our fund balance would look like if we used to offset the deficit, what current fund balance would look like. Mr. Bard, do you want to hand off that one and
If you
drive
guys
that?
do you guys have any questions about this and the categories or anything like that? Okay, yeah. Well, what's?
I think what we all want to avoid to the best of our ability is to continue to utilize fund balance as the only means to balance a budget. And I'll say that again, that is what we, all of us, do not want to continue to do. Going to the next slide, and as I said, I'll send this slide deck out so you could review as well. It's just some, again, I think it's important for everybody. These are some ongoing administrative controls that we have. Anytime there's an open position, before it's posted and before we go and we begin to hire, we look at that. We look at that and say internally, number one, does it need to be filled? And if we don't fill it, what is the impact on our students? That's the most important thing. What's the impact on our students, and what's the impact on that particular, and if it's, what is that impact? Number two is we continue to look at our contracts. We don't just sign a contract, we review it to make sure. I can tell you, everybody in this room does a heck of a job when it comes to reviewing and making sure that we get the best bang for our buck, and if we don't, we call them, and we ask a ton of questions, and we wait, and we ask some more. Number three is we look for competitive pricing, and we also try to utilize, when appropriately, the co-op pricing as well, and then we compare it. We like to, the utilization of sharing of resources and materials, between the sharing between high school, middle school, and elementary school. That's really the power of being on one campus, but also the power of being able to share different materials and resources. We've been fortunate to have incredible support from the Black Hawk Foundation. When you think of a lot of our STEAM initiatives, when you think of being able to help with offsetting some costs that our student trips, that students wouldn't be able to necessarily take without some of that support. Supporting college and the high school programs, to having access, so students have access and opportunity to those. So that's outstanding. And the last one is really important. You were able to see, yes, there's some deficiencies within the buildings, but you're able to see the cleanliness of it, and to think of where some of those things are. It could be a lot bigger list than what it currently is, because Mr. Howell and his team does a lot of preventive maintenance. There's not a minute that goes by of the day that they're not out repairing, fixing, communicating. I mean, I hear the radio transmissions, I know. There's a lot of communications that go back and forth, and the teamwork that goes into that. Nobody wants to hear this, but here's some future budget considerations, because it's important that we share these. Because again, when we build a budget, we don't just build it for one fiscal year. We're looking and we're projecting outwards, right? And we're looking at things down the road. And we don't just, and nobody here on this team has just kicked the can down the road at all. That is not anybody's style here, and will not continue to be our style. One is the facilities consideration. You just saw some elements from our feasibility study. Act 93 and collective bargaining agreements. Again, not to reiterate, but we know we're not going to have the ESSERS fund that concludes. The $940,000 also includes one-time items as well. So that's the total for this year, and I'll break that down for you so you can get that a little bit further. Or actually, I'll send the whole report, and you could take a look at that and see that all. It's important to note that no positions were added as a result of ESSERS. We already talked about that, but we're not hearing and not seeing, unfortunately, any movement on charter school funding reform. So our current deficit right now after work, lots of work, by this total team is $2.43 million. Roughly, we're projecting in cyber charter costs to exceed $2.7 million. I just want to reiterate that.
And I hear the fervor in everybody about that, but what do we do? Like, we can make the announcement and we can tell people they need to come back, but what do we do as a school board other than just send a letter and saying, we really think this is unfair? What can we do? I mean, because I want to do something. Like, I'll be the first one to go down, stand on the Capitol steps. But, I mean, we need to, so at some point we just got to say, I know we can't say no because it comes off as a thing, but what can we do?
I don't know what can be done. To me, this isn't often said, but I think it's kind of obvious that some of the state legislatures are getting paid off by the charter schools. And until they turn that thing around, nothing's going to change.
They have more lobbyists than
Yeah.
all of.
Well, it's interesting because they're for profit and they can pay lobbyists, and you guys really only have the PSBA, and that's it. So, I mean, I'm staying at a hotel that's right next to a huge Commonwealth Charter Academy that has big bright lights and everything like that. We can't afford anything like that. So, I mean, it's simple as that.
So why we can't necessarily compete with large lobbyists and balloons that they put into parades, which is true, in Philadelphia parades, or billboards that they put up next to the Wells Fargo Arena and other advertisements for the Super Bowl. What we can do is just reaching out like we have been, having those conversations, are allowing people to come back in and take a look. What we say, all of us, and I'm not just talking to us at 10, 14, 15, how many are here? I can't really count. That's not good when we're talking about budget. But the community at large, all of us, this is an all of us issue. So even the families that are out there, this impacts you too, because we're talking about difficult things. And when we have to talk about revenue, you're being impacted twice by it. So take a look. I'm not saying for some people this might not be a good option. I'm saying we have a good option too with our Black Hawk Academy, and it can be a little bit more flexible based upon your need.
And also remember, you get the added benefit when you're a Black Hawk Academy member. You get the benefit of coming to the prom. You get a benefit of participating in all the extracurricular activities that the Black Hawks have to offer. You don't get that opportunity when you are at a private cyber school. You don't get that opportunity to come to all the extra events that the school has to offer here.
We sent last year a resolution, and that resolution is still on record, that we sent a resolution to the Senate and the House of Representatives that basically that we all signed as a united board, and several other boards throughout Pennsylvania said the same thing, wanting to look at cyber charter relief. That's one element. The second is go ahead, send an email, and that's okay. Send an email to our local representatives, to our senators, to invite them in to see what our fiscal take is and how that's impacting us and our communities.
We're not going to be able to tax our way out of it. It's just going to keep happening. What happens if we go bankrupt? What would happen? I mean, I'm not saying you let the school district go bankrupt, but nothing's going to stop it if we don't do something more than just send an email. Because we tax our constituents, and all that tax money is going to do is a large portion of it's going to go to the cyber charter schools. Like, it's not.
Well, I
I
think,
feel like it's a cyclical thing, and it's.
Mrs. Singley, the administration has done a phenomenal job at stopping students before they want to leave and offering the Black Hawk Academy. I know Craig, Jason, Michelle, when she was here, did a phenomenal job at stopping the kids from leaving before, and I think that's a huge break, as you can see the numbers are coming down. So they're doing a great thing at doing this. I think that's the first big step. To address your concern about going bankrupt, the district can do certain things now to stop that tide from happening. The first thing is continuing to manage your expenses properly. The second thing is to begin to plan to build your income. You could start raising taxes slowly. You don't have to do it this year. You can do it, 2.5 to you'd start biting off small chunks of it at a time so you don't rip the Band-Aid off at one time. And that's the way you do it. And the districts, what happens if you start getting into the thing when you run out of fund balance, what happens is you have cash problems. At certain times, payroll becomes very tight, where you have to start taking a tax anticipation note in the summertime to make ends meet until your tax revenue starts coming in, and you have an interest rate accumulation that comes along with that. That's what happens. Districts don't go bankrupt. They could be taken over by the state, but in this district's case, based on the past history of your millage rate and where it stood and where it stands historically among your peers, the state's going to send in a advisor who's going to tell you to raise taxes. And then there's going to be someone else that'll come in Dr. Fox's place and say, you're going to raise taxes and take it kind of away from you, your discretion. And that's how usually it works. So you don't want it to get to that level. So I think in this case, I think you guys are on the right place by thinking about what the plan is 5 years down the road, 6 years down the road. But I don't think we're in that step. I think you guys are in the right. We'll get there. We'll be all right.
Just some notes and considerations. This budget does not really include a lot of ongoing capital projects, including flooring, repairing, paving, carpet, et cetera. If we do decide to do any of those needed items, they'll have to be authorized via capital reserve funds. We also talked about, and again, the continuation of not wanting to use fund balance to stabilize our budget in the future, and not increasing. One of the constraints, of course, is not increasing revenue in our current and previous budgets. So our next steps. Please review the line items and add any questions that you may have, and certainly as a team, we'll work through those questions. They're all good questions. There's no such thing as not a great question. I know Mrs. Balsbot already sent out that document, so it should be live. We'll make sure you get also a paper copy of those line items as well on March 21st. And we continue to look at, and we continue to pare down. We continue to see anything that comes forward, and we try to make it as lean as we certainly can.
I think Mrs. Boswell had asked us not to ask any questions until this presentation. So moving forward, do you want us to enter our questions into that document, or should we? Yeah, okay, I guess, is there a deadline for that, or sooner rather than later?
Sooner rather than later, because I think there'll need to be a cutoff, so giving us a couple of days prior to March 21st, so we can prepare properly to try to have some of those answered and ready to go.
Is there, I know Mike and I specifically requested paper copies. Is there any chance that we could have those next week so we could have a chance to review, to be prepared for the meeting on the 21st?
That's what I was going to say.
Dive right
We
in?
need them before the 21st, if you want us to ask questions. Unless you want me to print it out at home and then send you a bill.
We can't forward your bill.
Paper copies of what?
Well,
Budget.
I tried to use the filter tool, but it's locked, so you can't edit the filter to be able to have it update in the spreadsheet.
Okay.
So I don't know if you can unlock that somehow, but still keep the rest of it locked.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, we'll
Oh,
take a
yeah,
look at that.
because he made that thing so we could search stuff.
Right.
Last time, I
Okay.
remember this from last year.
Okay.
He made that filter.
Yeah,
Should
you.
be on a tab that's in the far right. It's probably the second to last tab.
Yeah, we'll have it. We'll be able to be able to search
So
that.
absolutely, I'll can get paper copies in your hands, but what's the best way to get those to you?
Well, you can give them to us next
Oh,
week.
yeah, sorry, I keep thinking tonight's the board meeting.
And we already have the book, so
Sorry.
really just need
No,
the
the
paper.
board
We
meeting's
can
gonna be a lot
put it in the-
shorter
We can put it
than
in the book
tonight.
ourselves.
Okay.
Except for
That's
did get a
right.
book that was twice
Yep,
the size of
you'll get them on the
everybody's
14th,
and
my
looked
fault,
used.
and apologies.
That, you got the book. That was supposed to be Dr. Fox's, and he switched it with yours.
All right, well, thank you. We'll make sure we get those copies for the 14th. Now, at this time, is there any public comment?
Everybody's in bed.
So hearing no public comment, we did, just for conversation, we did come out of a brief executive session to discuss one personnel item. And we will see everybody back on March 14th, 2023 for our board meeting. Thank you.